The sky above Musutafu did not merely darken, it fractured. There was no sound at first, only a sudden, violent displacement of atmospheric pressure that caused windows within a 3-mile radius to bow outward. The air turned heavy, tasting of ionized copper and static discharge. To the civilians on the ground, it felt as though gravity had momentarily doubled, pressing the breath out of their lungs. Then came the noise. It was not the boom of thunder, but the tearing shriek of reality being forced open by technology far exceeding the comprehension of Earth's current support gear engineers. High above the cloud layer, a geometric rift opened, a hexagonal tunnel of swirling purples and blacks, defying the physics of the quirk-based society below. From this wound in the sky, gods of steel began to fall. They descended with the grace of meteors. The heat of re-entry turned their armored plating into streaks of white fire. One trajectory, steeper and faster than the others, aimed directly for the erratic chaos of the Tateyama shopping district, where a B-rank villain with a gigantification quirk was currently holding off a squad of police officers. The villain, a man whose skin had hardened into rock-like plates, roared, swinging a fist the size of a compact car at the police barricade. He felt invincible. His adrenaline was peaking. He was unaware that his lifespan was now being measured in milliseconds. The object from the sky struck the villain directly. There was no resistance. The kinetic energy of the impact vaporized the asphalt, sending a shockwave rippling through the concrete that shattered glass 6 blocks away. A crater 50 meters wide replaced the intersection. Dust and pulverized debris plumed upward like a mushroom cloud, choking the screams of the bystanders. In the center of the crater, the smoke swirled, disturbed by the venting of superheated hydraulics. 2 burning red optics pierced the gloom. Slowly the figure rose. It was massive, towering over the surrounding buildings, gleaming in silver and gunmetal gray. A fusion cannon, humming with a lethal, high-pitched whine, was mounted on its right arm. The being did not look like a machine built by human hands. It moved with a fluid, predatory elegance that belied its immense tonnage. Megatron had arrived. He surveyed the scene, his optical sensors cycling through spectrums, thermal, ultraviolet, electromagnetic. He analyzed the structural integrity of the Japanese architecture and found it laughably fragile. He scanned the biologicals scurrying away like insects. Organic filth, Megatron synthesized, his voice a deep, resonating grind that vibrated in the chest cavities of everyone present. Every universe, the same infestation. The giant villain, miraculously alive but broken, groaned from beneath Megatron's peed. The rock-skinned man tried to push himself up, his quirk activating to regenerate his crushed shoulder. Megatron looked down. He did not feel anger. He felt the cold, calculating indifference of a being who had waged war for 4 million years. He lifted his leg. The servos in his knee whined with potential energy. "You possess resilience," Megatron noted, the observation purely clinical. "Let us test its limits." He stomped. The sound was wet and crunching, sickeningly distinct even over the blaring car alarms. The villain's screams were cut short, not by mercy, but by the total liquidation of his torso. The prompt brutality was absolute. There was no monologue about villainy, no hesitation, just the extermination of an obstacle. From the sky, 3 more shapes descended, transforming mid-air with a rhythmic, clanking cadence. Ch-ch-whir-kunk. Starscream, sleek and sharp-angled, landed on top of a skyscraper, his thrusters scorching the rooftop garden. Soundwave touched down silently behind Megatron, his chest compartment already ejecting a cassette that unfolded into a robotic condor. Laserbeak, which took to the sky to conduct aerial reconnaissance. Shockwave landed with a heavy thud, his singular yellow eye immediately scanning the local power grid, deeming it primitive but harvestable. "Lord Megatron," Starscream screeched, his voice grating and treacherous, "the localized energy readings are erratic. These biologicals, they emit distinct biological energy signatures. Mutations." "Irrelevant," Megatron replied, stepping out of the crater, dragging a mess of power lines with him. "If they stand, they die. If they kneel, they serve." Several blocks away, Izuku Midoriya froze. His danger sense, the fourth user's quirk, was not just buzzing, it was screaming in his skull, a sensation of piercing, white-hot agony. This wasn't the feeling of a villain attack. It wasn't the malice of Shigaraki or the looming threat of All for One. This was different. This was the sensation of an apex predator entering an ecosystem that had no defense against it. "Deku, what is it?" Uraraka called out, hovering nearby, her face pale as she felt the tremors in the ground. "We have to move," Izuku whispered, his eyes wide, pupils dilated to pinpricks. "We have to evacuate everyone. Now! This isn't a quirk." Before they could act, a beam of violet energy sliced through the air. It originated from Megatron's fusion cannon. The blast didn't just explode, it atomized a swath of the city block, erasing matter instantly. The heat was so intense it fused the oxygen in the air, creating a vacuum that sucked debris back into the path of the beam. But the beam did not hit its intended target, the fleeing civilians. A blur of red and blue intercepted the blast. There was a collision of forces that turned the night sky into noon. An energy shield, glowing a translucent orange, absorbed the fusion blast, straining under the terajoules of energy being poured into it. The ground beneath the shield bearer cracked, sinking 3 feet instantly, but the figure did not yield. As the smoke from the energy discharge cleared, a second Titan stood revealed. He was blockier, colored in patriotic red and blue, with exhaust pipes rising from his shoulders like smokestacks of a fortress. His faceplate slid shut with a metallic clack, sealing his expression in grim determination. Optimus Prime stood between the Decepticons and the city of Musutafu. "Megatron!" Prime boomed. His voice was different from the Decepticons. It carried the weight of eons, a gravelly baritone that projected not fear, but an absolute, unshakable safety. It was a voice that resonated with the concept of a symbol of peace, yet it came from a machine of war. "You have traveled galaxies only to bring your tyranny to another world. It ends here." Megatron smiled behind his steel visage. The expression was terrifying. "Prime, I was wondering how long you would hide." Behind Optimus, 5 Autobots rolled onto the scene, transforming in unison. Bumblebee, small and agile, leaped over a burning bus, his plasma cannon charging. Ironhide, scarred and bulky, leveled his heavy cannons. Arcee, swift and precise, drew twin energon blades. Grimlock, in his robot mode, roared, a sound that rivaled the initial sonic boom, shaking the glass of the remaining windows. Midoriya, watching from a rooftop, felt a chill run down his spine. He pulled out his notebook, his hands shaking. He watched as Optimus Prime deployed an energon axe from his wrist, the blade glowing with searing orange plasma. "One shall stand," Prime declared, shifting his stance, the hydraulics in his legs locking into a combat position that suggested intimate knowledge of momentum and leverage. "And one shall fall," Megatron finished, launching himself forward with the thrust of a rocket engine. When they collided, the Shockwave blew the windows out of UA High 3 miles away. The invasion had begun. The arrival of the number 1 and number 2 Pro heroes was usually a signal that order was about to be restored. Today, it was merely the introduction of fresh data into a chaotic equation. Hawks arrived first. His entry was sonic, a blur of crimson wings cutting through the particulate matter hanging over the city. His fierce eyes, protected by a visor, scanned the battlefield at a processing speed that made the world appear to crawl. He cataloged the destruction, the crater, the fleeing civilians, and the Titans clashing in the distance. His threat assessment instincts, honed to a razor's edge by the HPSC, were currently firing blank errors. There was no quirk registry match, no biological signature. He banked hard, locking onto a target perched atop the ruins of the Tateyama station. It was the sleek, tri-colored machine, Starscream. "Feather blades," Hawks muttered, the vibration of his throat barely audible over the wind. He detached 30 of his stiffest primaries. Telekinetically guided, they accelerated to subsonic speeds, aiming for what his intuition identified as vulnerable points: the optical sensors, the intake turbines, and the exposed hydraulics behind the knee joints. It was a precision strike designed to cripple a high-end Nomu. The feathers struck. Ting, ting, ting. The sound was pathetic. It was the sound of needles hitting an anvil. The feathers, harder than steel, did not pierce the Cybertronian alloy. They shattered. The kinetic energy reverberated back into the quills, snapping them instantly. Starscream didn't even flinch. He slowly rotated his head, a movement of mechanical disdain, and focused his optics on the winged man hovering 50 meters away. "Biological flotsam," Starscream screeched. The audio output was modulated to a frequency that caused Hawk's vestibule system to spike, inducing a split second of vertigo. "You dare scratch my finish?" Hawks' eyes widened. "It's not armor," his mind raced, analyzing the lack of damage. "It's his skin. He's made of it." Starscream raised his arm. The null ray attached to his bicep began to glow with a sickly pink luminescence. The air around the weapon ionized, smelling of ozone and death. "Dodge!" Hawks commanded himself, his wings flaring. He dove just as the beam fired. The null ray didn't produce heat, it produced total cessation. The beam clipped the corner of a bank building behind Hawks. The concrete didn't explode. It simply turned gray and crumbled into dust, its molecular bonds severed instantly. Hawks broke into a cold sweat. If that had hit him, he wouldn't have been burned. He would have been unmade. Below them, the temperature skyrocketed. Endeavor had arrived. The flame hero hit the pavement with enough force to crack the asphalt, his beard of fire blazing at maximum output. His turquoise eyes were locked on a different target. Shockwave. The purple Cyclops stood amidst the wreckage of a convenience store, holding a terrified civilian car in one hand, as if it were a stress ball. He was observing the vehicle's crushing point with scientific curiosity. "Put it down!" Endeavor roared. He didn't wait for compliance. He couldn't afford to. The villain was colossal. Flash fire fist, jet burn. Endeavor condensed his flames into a concentrated beam of white-hot plasma. He thrust his palm forward. The fire roared, a torrent of thermal energy exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius, aimed directly at Shockwave's chest. It was a move that had incinerated Hyonomus. It was the pinnacle of human pyrokinetic power. The fire engulfed Shockwave. The street turned into a furnace. Glass melted in frames 50 feet away. Endeavor panted, steam rising from his suit. He waited for the scream, the smell of burning flesh, the collapse of the enemy. The fire cleared. Shockwave was still standing. The purple plating on his chest was glowing a dull, angry orange, radiating the absorbed heat, but it was nowhere near melting. The Cybertronian metal, forged to withstand the atmospheric re-entry of gas giants and the direct impact of laser weaponry, considered Endeavor's flames a mild environmental hazard. Shockwave turned his single, unblinking yellow eye toward the #1 hero. Temperature, 2,100 degrees, Shockwave stated, his voice a monotone void of emotion. Inefficient. Your energy output is biologically capped. Illogical to continue. Endeavor froze. For the first time since fighting the hooded Nomu, he felt a flicker of genuine terror. It wasn't fear of death, it was the fear of irrelevance. His fire, his rage, his power. It meant nothing to this thing. You? What are you? Endeavor grit his teeth, forcing his flames hotter, pushing his body toward overheating. Shockwave raised his left arm, which terminated not in a hand, but in a massive laser cannon. The barrel spun, whining as it drew power from his internal reactor. I am your extinction, Shockwave replied. He fired. The blast was not a precise beam like Starscream's, but a chaotic eruption of gamma radiation and concussive force. Endeavor crossed his arms, creating a shield of fire. But physics was not on his side. The impact sent the #1 hero flying backward through 3 consecutive office buildings. The sound of reinforced concrete snapping was louder than the explosion itself. Endeavor crumpled into the lobby of the 3rd building, his hero suit shredded, his reinforced bracers twisted like tin foil. He gasped for air, coughing up blood, his internal organs rattled by a force that hit like a moving train. High above, Hawks watched the strongest man in Japan get swatted away like a nuisance. He realized then, with a sinking feeling in his gut, that the hierarchy of power had just been violently rewritten. They weren't fighting villains. They were fighting walking natural disasters made of sentient metal, and the heroes were made of meat. Shockwave stood over the broken form of Endeavor. The Cyclopean Decepticon did not gloat. He merely adjusted the aperture of his laser cannon, narrowing the focus for a cranial incision. The logic was sound. Eliminate the local leader, demoralize the resistance. Calculation complete, Shockwave droned, the yellow light of his optic intensifying. Probability of survival, 0. He fired. The beam did not connect. It did not hit the ground. It did not hit a wall. It hit a wall of air pressure so dense it possessed the physical properties of titanium. There was a noise that transcended sound, a thunderclap that shattered every remaining pane of glass in a 4-mile radius. The shock wave of the arrival was so violent that Shockwave, a 40-ton war machine anchored by magnetic clamps in his feet, was physically shunted backward 10 meters, his metallic heels carving deep trenches into the concrete. Dust swirled in a tornado of golden potential. From the center of the vortex, a voice boomed. It was not the strained, desperate shout of a man fighting for his life. It was a roar of absolute, undiluted power. A voice that had defined an era. I am here! The dust was blown away by a flex of sheer muscle. Standing over Endeavor was a Titan, not the skeletal figure known to the modern world, but the Golden Age Colossus. He was a mountain of muscle, his smile blinding, his presence so overwhelming it felt as if the sun had descended to street level. This was All Might, Prime, uninjured, unlimited. He wore no support items. He needed none. Shockwave's internal processor spiked. Alert. Energy reading. Off the scale. Biological mass does not correlate with kinetic output. Fascinating, Shockwave stated, raising his cannon again. A statistical anomaly. An anomaly? All Might laughed, but his eyes were shadowed, devoid of humor. He had seen the devastation. He saw Endeavor bleeding. I am no anomaly, villain. I am the wall you will not pass. All Might vanished. To the human eye, he simply teleported, To Shockwave's high-speed optical sensors, the human accelerated to Mach speeds in a fraction of a microsecond. All Might reappeared directly in front of Shockwave, floating in midair, level with the Decepticon's chest. Texas, smash! The fist connected with the purple thoracic plating of the Decepticon. Physics screamed. For the first time since landing, the Cybertronian alloy, metal forged in the wars of 1,000,000 years, yielded. The impact created a vacuum cone that extended behind Shockwave for 3 blocks, stripping the pavement from the earth. Shockwave didn't just stumble, he was launched. The massive machine flew backward, crashing through the ruins of the bank, through the office building behind it, and finally skidding to a halt nearly 200 meters away, buried under a collapsed overpass. Silence fell over the district. Endeavor, clutching his shattered ribs, looked up with blurry vision. He saw the back of the symbol of peace. It was broad, unyielding, and radiating a heat that rivaled his own flames. "Rest, Engie," All Might said, his voice low, vibrating with suppressed rage. "I will handle the metal men." Rubble shifted in the distance. A purple hand, missing 2 fingers, punched through the concrete debris. Shockwave rose. His chest plate was caved in, a massive fist-shaped depression marring the perfect geometry of his armor. Sparks showered from a ruptured energon line, bleeding glowing pink fluid onto the ground. Shockwave's optic flickered, recalibrating. "Pain," Shockwave synthesized, sounding more curious than hurt. "Sensors indicate structural compromise at 14%. This biological possesses Class 10 destructive capabilities." From the skyline, a jet transformed. Starscream landed on a perch above Shockwave, looking down at the damaged scientist. "You let a fleshy knock you down, Shockwave?" Starscream mocked, though his wings twitched nervously as he looked at the golden human. "Pathetic." "Negative," Shockwave replied, locking his singular eye on All Might. "It is a variable we failed to predict. The biologicals here, they have champions." All Might cracked his knuckles, the sound like gunshots. He crouched, the ground cracking under his boots as he prepared to leap again. He wasn't smiling to hide fear anymore. He was smiling because he was the only thing standing between these monsters and the people. "You speak of percentages and variables," All Might shouted, his aura flaring yellow and blue. "But you forgot the most important calculation. You cannot measure the human spirit." High above, locked in a grapple with Optimus Prime, Megatron paused. He looked down, his red optics zooming in on the golden figure who had just dented his most loyal soldier. "Prime," Megatron growled, a dark amusement coloring his tone. "Look, it seems this mudball has a warrior worthy of my attention." The air between the combatants shimmered, not from heat, but from the sheer density of killing intent. Megatron disengaged from Optimus Prime. He did not retreat. He simply altered his vector. His thrusters flared, shifting his massive bulk from a hover to a terminal velocity dive. He fell like a judgment, aiming not for the ground, but for the golden gnat that had dared to damage his logic-driven lieutenant. "All Might!" Endeavor wheezed, trying to stand, his ribs grinding together. "Above you!" The warning was superfluous. All Might had already felt the change in air pressure. He looked up, his blue eyes locking onto the descending gray blur. "New challenger," All Might whispered, his smile tightening by a millimeter. "Let's see if you can keep up." The symbol of peace didn't wait to be crushed. He bent his knees, the asphalt instantly turning to powder under the sudden load, and launched himself upward. "Detroit, smash!" Human flesh and one-for-all energy met Cybertronian steel and dark energon malice in midair, 50 meters above the street. The collision created a horizontal ring of condensed air that sliced through the nearby glass facades like a guillotine. Megatron halted in midair, his momentum arrested by the sheer force of the biological uppercut. His head snapped back, the metal of his chin plating buckling with a screech of tortured alloy. For a microsecond, the Decepticon leader was stunned. The force was comparable to a point-blank energon mortar, but Megatron did not fall. His hand, a clawed vice capable of crushing diamonds, lashed out with blinding speed. He caught All Might's fist before the hero could retract it. The smile on All Might's face faltered. He pulled. He could not move. It was like trying to pull his hand out of a mountain. Megatron's head snapped back forward. His red optics were narrowing, zooming in on the man's face. The Decepticon's chassis groaned as his internal servos maximized torque. "Impressive," Megatron's voice rumbled, vibrating through All Might's arm and into his very skeleton. "You strike with the force of a tectonic shift, but you lack mass." Megatron spun in the air, using his superior weight as a weapon. He whipped All Might downward, flinging him toward the earth with a velocity that broke the sound barrier. All Might hit the street. It wasn't a landing. It was an impact event. The hero skipped off the pavement like a stone across water, tearing through a bus stop, a lamp post, and the front lobby of a hotel before coming to a stop in a pile of rubble. Megatron landed softly, his fusion cannon already charging. The whine of the weapon rose to a piercing shriek. "You fight for peace," Megatron mocked, walking toward the hole in the hotel. "Peace is an illusion, little hero, a lull between conflicts. The only truth is conquest." He leveled the cannon at the hotel lobby. Suddenly, the rubble exploded outward. All Might burst forth, his suit dusty but his body unbroken. His prime durability was absolute. The impact that would have liquefied a lesser hero had merely annoyed him. "Philosophy later. Surrender now." All Might moved in a blur, circling Megatron to confuse the targeting sensors. He threw a flurry of punches, left, right, body, head. Bam, bam, clang, crunch. Each hit left a dent. Each hit rattled Megatron's gyro stabilizers. But for every 10 punches All Might landed, Megatron only needed to land one. The Decepticon swung his fusion cannon like a club. All Might ducked, the heavy weapon shearing the top off a delivery truck behind him. "You are annoying," Megatron grunted. He activated the dark matter thrusters in his heels, performing a spin kick that defied his size. The heavy metal pede connected with All Might's chest. All Might gasped as the air left his lungs. He slid backward, his boots carving deep trenches in the road. Before Megatron could press the advantage, a heavy mechanical hand clamped onto his shoulder. Optimus Prime had arrived. "Megatron!" Prime roared. He didn't use a weapon. He used brute force. He spun his brother around and delivered a piston-driven cross to Megatron's jaw. The impact sent a spray of sparks and metal shards flying. Megatron staggered, stumbling back. Optimus stepped between the Decepticon leader and the symbol of peace. He looked down at All Might. The two titans, one of flesh, one of metal, shared a brief, silent communion. In that second, they understood each other perfectly. They were both pillars holding up the sky for those who couldn't. "You fight bravely," Optimus said, his faceplate sliding back to reveal a face that, while robotic, conveyed deep, weary respect. But his armor is reinforced with self-repairing nanites. Blunt force alone will not stop him. All Might stood straight, dusting off his shoulder. His smile returned, shining brighter than before. "Then we shall have to hit him harder together. What do you say, Metal Man?" Optimus nodded, his faceplate sliding back into place with a definitive click. My name is Optimus Prime, and I agree. Megatron recovered, wiping a leak of glowing purple fluid from his mouth. He looked at the two of them, the red and blue truck, the red and blue human. The visual symmetry disgusted him. Alliance, Megatron spat. The refuge of the weak. Soundwave, Starscream, converge. From the rooftops, missiles rained down. Starscream strafed the street, unleashing a barrage of high-explosive ordnance. Optimus raised his energon axe, deflecting the missiles with impossible precision, the explosions blooming like fiery flowers around him. All Might saw the opening. Prime, throw me! Optimus didn't hesitate. He understood the physics instantly. He cupped his massive metal hands. All Might stepped into the makeshift stirrup. Optimus heaved, his hydraulics screaming as he launched the human missile. All Might rocketed through the smoke of the missile barrage, spinning like a drill. He aimed not for Megatron, but for the incoming Starscream. Oklahoma, smash! All Might caught Starscream by the nose cone mid-flight. The Seeker shrieked as his aerodynamics were violently rewritten. All Might spun him around, using the jet's own momentum, and slammed him directly into the ground at Megatron's feet. Starscream crunched into the pavement, reverting to robot mode in a tangle of limbs and screeching metal. Lord Megatron, help! Starscream wailed. Megatron looked down at his second-in-command, then back at the two heroes standing side by side. Get up, you fool! Megatron growled, kicking Starscream aside. The war has truly followed us. The battlefield had shifted. It was no longer a slaughter. It was a brawl. And in the distance, a low, ominous rumble began to emanate from the ground. Not from a machine, but from something buried deep beneath the city. The battle had woken something else. The signal from the Tateyama district was not being broadcast on television. The cameras had melted. The signal was being felt in the marrow of the bone. In a location that did not exist on any map, a cavernous, sterile void hidden beneath a mountain range, two predators watched the data streams provided by a hacked military satellite. One was a young man with hair the color of bone, his skin scarred and itching with a destructive potential that could rot a city to dust in minutes. Tamura Shigaraki in his completed apex form. He sat hunched, his red eyes tracking the silver blur of Megatron. He scratched at his neck, not out of anxiety, but out of a starving, predatory envy. They are louder than me, Shigaraki rasped. I don't like it. Standing behind him was a man who cast a shadow over the entire history of Japan. He wore a pristine suit, his face not a mass of scar tissue, but fully formed, handsome, and terrifyingly calm. This was All for One in his prime, before All Might crushed his skull, before the Respirator, the Demon King, whole and absolute. It is not a quirk, All for One observed. His voice was smooth like velvet over broken glass. He raised a hand, looking at his own palm. He possessed thousands of abilities: thermal manipulation, kinetic boosting, impact recoil, sensory stealing. He could feel the quirks of every hero in Musutafu flaring in panic. But the giants, they were voids. They are empty, All for One murmured, a flicker of genuine curiosity breaking his boredom. Great power, yet hollow. No quirk factors to seize, no genetic lineage to sever. Can I dust them? Shigaraki asked, standing up. The floor beneath his feet turned to gray powder, the disintegration spreading like a rapid infection before he deactivated it. That, All for One smiled, is the hypothesis we must test. Kurogiri. The warp gate opened. Musutafu, Sector 4, the perimeter. Soundwave, the Decepticon spy master, was perched on a communications tower 3 blocks from the main melee. His internal logic subroutines were processing petabytes of data. All Might's punch velocity, Optimus Prime's tactical patterns, the erratic energy spikes of the local biologicals. Analysis. Autobot alliance with local champion increases threat level by 400%. Recommendation. Call for Trypticon. He prepared to transmit the signal into deep space. He did not detect the swirling black fog opening directly behind him until the atmospheric displacement alarm triggered. Target located, a voice said. Soundwave spun, his shoulder cannon charging. A hand touched his leg. It was a light touch, almost affectionate. It came from a pale, wiry human who had stepped out of the fog. Soundwave's optical sensors registered the contact. Threat assessment. Negligible. Biological lacks sufficient mass to. Warning, molecular cohesion failing. The blue plating of Soundwave's shin didn't dent. It didn't melt. It flaked. The decay spread with terrifying velocity. The ancient Cybertronian alloy, forged to withstand cosmic radiation and proton missiles, turned into gray rust, then into dust. The corrosion raced up his leg, eating through servos, hydraulics, and energon lines. Soundwave shrieked, a digital sound of pure error. He severed his own leg at the knee with a laser blast to stop the spread, crashing to the rooftop below. Harder than concrete, Shigaraki noted, looking at the pile of metallic dust where the leg had been. He grinned, a horrific expression that stretched his scars. But it still rots. Soundwave rebooted his equilibrium instantly, transforming into his cassette player mode to minimize surface area, then ejecting Ravage. The robotic Jaguar lunged at Shigaraki. The Jaguar was intercepted mid-air. All for One stepped out of the portal. He didn't touch the robot. He simply looked at it. Air cannon, max output plus spring-like limbs, plus kinetic booster ×4. He flicked his fingers. The air pressure unleashed was equivalent to a tactical nuke. Ravage wasn't pushed back. The robot was flattened against the invisible wall of force, his chassis crumpling like a soda can. The blast wave continued, blowing the top 4 stories off the communications tower and sending Soundwave tumbling into the street below. All for One floated down, levitating with a grace that mocked gravity. He landed on the street, his suit unruffled. He looked at the chaotic battlefield. To his left, Endeavor was bleeding. To his right, Megatron was fighting All Might and Optimus. The symbol of evil took a deep breath. Megatron, was it? All for One's voice was amplified by a megaphone quirk, drowning out the explosions. You are breaking my toys. Megatron, currently grappling with Optimus, turned his head. He saw the new arrival. He scanned him. Scan complete. Biological. Energy signature, high. Threat level, unknown. More insects, Megatron sneered, throwing Optimus aside. He raised his fusion cannon at All for One. Burn. The violet beam fired. All for One did not dodge. He held out his hand. Impact recoil plus energy absorption plus redirect. The fusion blast hit All for One's palm. The energy was not absorbed. It was too foreign, too dense, but it could be redirected. The Demon King spun, his arm bulging as the Quirks strained under the alien physics, and whipped the beam sideways. The fusion blast carved a trench through the city, slicing the top off a mountain in the distance. All for One laughed. It was a sound of pure delight. Oh, I want that, he whispered. I cannot steal your quirk, so I will simply take your body. He pointed at Megatron. Black tendrils, the forced quirk activation rivets, shot out from his fingers, extending like spears. They weren't aiming for flesh. They were aiming for the joints, the seams in the armor. He intended to puppet the machine from the inside. Shigaraki leaped past him, laughing maniacally, diving straight for Optimus Prime. "Hey, truck guy!" Shigaraki yelled, reaching out with all 5 fingers. "Let's see what's under the hood!" The war had just become a 3-way deadlock. The heroes and Autobots fought for peace. The Decepticons fought for conquest. And the Prime villains? They fought because they refused to let anyone else destroy their world. The battlefield was a cacophony of physics-defying impacts. But for Izuku Midoriya, the world was silent. It was the silence of absolute focus. He hovered in the air 3 blocks away, shrouded in a smokescreen of his own making. The 9th holder of One for All was not the trembling boy who broke his bones. He was a singularity of power. Green lightning crackled violently around him, arcing off his skin and vaporizing the rain as it fell. 6 quirks hummed in his veins, synchronized into a perfect engine of destruction. His danger sense, 4th user, was not just stabbing his skull, it was projecting a fatal premonition. He saw the timeline. The white-haired villain, Shigaraki, touching the leg of the red and blue Titan, the metal graying, the rot spreading instantly to the machine's core, the explosion of the Titan's nuclear heart. "No!" Midoriya breathed. He shifted gears, literally. Gear shift, overdrive, low gear to top gear. The laws of inertia ignored him. He accelerated from 0 to supersonic instantly, leaving a sonic cone that shattered the windows of the building he had just launched from. The front line. Optimus Prime looked down at the pale, laughing creature leaping toward him. The Autobot leader's combat algorithms were confused. This biological entity had no armor, no projectile weapons, and possessed negligible mass. Yet the energy readings were catastrophic. "Let me see your spark!" Shigaraki screamed, his hand outstretched, 5 fingers splayed for the kill. Optimus raised his arm to block, a standard CQC maneuver. He did not know that blocking was a death sentence. A blur of green light tore through the space between them. It was faster than a seeker jet, faster than a laser volley. Fujin, Faux Simps Procenti, Manchester Smash. Midoriya didn't hit Shigaraki. He couldn't risk the contact. Instead, he slammed his iron-soled boot into the air pressure itself, utilizing the kinetic buildup of Fujin. The resulting air cannon hammered Shigaraki from the side, blasting the villain off his trajectory just inches before his fingers grazed Prime's chrome plating. Shigaraki skipped across the asphalt, tumbling like a rag doll before digging his fingers into the road to decay his momentum. Midoriya landed between the Titan and the villain. He didn't touch the ground. He suspended himself with Float, 7th user, hovering at eye level with Optimus Prime's knee joint. Black Whip, 5th user, exploded from his back, 6 tendrils of dark energy writhing like sentient cables, anchoring him to the surrounding buildings for rapid mobility. "Do not let him touch you," Midoriya shouted, his voice distorted by the raw power flowing through his cowl. He didn't look at Optimus. His green eyes were locked on Shigaraki. "His quirk is decay. If he touches your armor with 5 fingers, you will turn to dust. It ignores durability." Optimus Prime cycled his optics. He looked at the spot where Shigaraki had nearly touched him. He looked at the small green warrior floating before him. Analysis, biological ally, knowledge of enemy capabilities, high, speed, hypersonic. "Understood," Optimus rumbled, his battle mask sliding into place. He deployed his Energon sword, the blade glowing a fierce orange. "He is a walking rust plague." "Exactly," Midoriya said. "I'll take the aggro. You hit him from range." Shigaraki stood up, dusting off his tattered pants. He looked at Midoriya, and a twisted look of delight spread across his face. "Izuku Midoriya," Shigaraki hissed. "The little hero. You brought new friends? Good. I was getting bored of the old ones." Shigaraki lunged, but this time the ground beneath him erupted. Black Whip, Froppy style. Midoriya fired a tendril of black energy, wrapping it around a discarded car. He swung the vehicle like a flail, smashing it into Shigaraki. As the villain decayed the car mid-air, reducing it to dust, Midoriya was already moving. Smoke screen! Purple smoke flooded the street, blinding Shigaraki. Inside the smoke, Midoriya moved like a phantom. He was everywhere at once. A kick to the jaw, a punch to the liver. He was utilizing the second user's transmission, altering the speed of his impacts so that the blow landed before the nerve signal could reach Shigaraki's brain. Bam! Bam! Crack! Shigaraki was pushed back, his regeneration factor straining to keep up with the sheer volume of trauma being inflicted. "You're annoying!" Shigaraki roared, unleashing a wave of decay into the ground. "Jump!" Midoriya commanded. Optimus Prime didn't question the order. He activated his thrusters and leaped into the air. The street below them turned to gray ash, the decay spreading outward in a ripple of death that dissolved the foundations of 3 skyscrapers. As the buildings collapsed, Midoriya shot out of the dust cloud, Black Whip carrying him high. He landed on Optimus Prime's shoulder as the Autobot hovered. "He destroys everything he touches," Midoriya explained rapidly, his mind racing. "But he has a cooldown if he overuses it, and his regeneration is biological. If we hit him with enough heat, we can slow him down." Optimus Prime's optics narrowed. "Heat, I can provide that." The Autobot raised his ion blaster. The barrel glowed white-hot. "Cover me, young one," Optimus commanded. "Yes, sir," Midoriya replied. It was a surreal image. The greatest machine hero of Cybertron and the greatest human hero of Earth, moving as one unit. Across the battlefield, Megatron, still grappling with All for One, glanced over. He saw his rival, Prime, with a green lightning-clad human perched on his shoulder. "2 primes," Megatron muttered, blocking a punch from All for One. "And now, 2 symbols." He laughed. This world is worthy of conquest after all. The physical connection between the boy and the machine was tenuous, boots gripping a sloping metal shoulder plate. But the metaphysical connection was instant, violent, and profound. As Izuku Midoriya stood perched on Optimus Prime's chassis, the core of One for All began to vibrate in a frequency that bypassed the boy's nervous system and resonated directly with the Cybertronian's chest compartment. Inside the matrix of leadership, the accumulated wisdom of the Primes stirred. Inside the core of One for All, the vestiges of the past users awoke. To Optimus, the sensation was not data. It was not a glitch. It was a familiar hum, a chorus of voices spanning generations, echoing from a biological vessel that was far too small to contain such density of will. He did not see a teenager. He saw a peer, a vessel of legacy. "Young one," Optimus spoke, his voice vibrating through the plating Deku stood on, a rumble that felt like safety incarnate. "You are not alone in this fight. I sense the echoes of others within you." Deku's eyes widened beneath his cowl. The green lightning arcing off his body began to synchronize with the blue luminescence of the Autobot's optics. You can hear them?" "I carry a similar burden," Optimus replied, the flaps of his battle mask adjusting as he tracked Shigaraki's movements. "The wisdom of those who came before. We are merely the current sparks in an eternal flame." There was no time for philosophy. The white-haired destroyer was moving. Shigaraki laughed, a sound that tore at the throat. He didn't run. He flowed, his body morphing as countless hands sprouted from his back, creating a wave of calcified flesh that surged forward like a tsunami. "Touching moment," Shigaraki screamed, his eyes manic. "Let's see if your legacy can survive total entropy." The wave of hands crashed down. "Hold tight," Optimus commanded. The Autobot leader did not retreat. He transformed. The sound was a cacophony of shifting plates and locking gears. Chk-chk-whir-kunk. In less than a second, the towering robot became a massive armored semi-truck cab. But he didn't hit the ground. His tires spun in the air, converting into hover thrusters that burned with blue fire. Deku reacted with the instinct of the danger sense. He didn't fall. He leaped, firing Black Whip to anchor himself to the smokestacks of the vehicle mode. "Roll out!" Optimus accelerated. He didn't drive away from the decay. He drove over it. The hover thrusters kept him inches above the graying tide of death. As they surged toward Shigaraki, the cab transformed again, launching halfway back into robot mode, an upper body transformation while keeping the momentum of the vehicle. Optimus leveled his ion blaster. "Midoriya, vector correction." "Right!" Deku swung from the smokestack, using the centrifugal force to launch himself ahead of the blast. He wasn't the projectile, he was the pathfinder. "Smoke screen, max output." A cloud of red and purple smoke exploded around Shigaraki, blinding the villain. Shigaraki swiped blindly, decaying the air itself, but he couldn't see the thermal buildup approaching. Deku grabbed the barrel of the ion blaster with Black Whip, not to stop it, but to pull himself back, altering his own trajectory in mid-air to clear the firing line. "Now!" Deku screamed. Optimus pulled the trigger. The blast was blinding. A sphere of concentrated ion particles, hot enough to melt tungsten, slammed into Shigaraki just as the villain tried to locate them through the smoke. The impact was absolute. Shigaraki was vaporized from the waist up. The blast wave cleared the street, incinerating the decay wave and fusing the asphalt into glass. Optimus landed sliding to a halt, his metallic feet carving grooves in the glass. Deku landed beside him, crouching, steam rising from his costume. "Target eliminated?" Optimus queried, his sensors scanning the burning remains. "No," Deku whispered, dread pooling in his stomach. He's laughing." From the charred stump of Shigaraki's waist, flesh bubbled. It wasn't healing, it was erupting. Bone knit together with sickening speed. Muscle fibers wove themselves out of nothing. In 3 seconds, Tamura Shigaraki stood whole again, naked save for the tattered remains of his pants, his skin smoking. "Hot?" Shigaraki giggled, cracking his neck. "That was actually hot." "My turn." He raised both hands, the air pressure dropped. Radio waves plus air cannon plus heavy payload. A shockwave of invisible force slammed into them. Optimus crossed his arms, shielding Deku. The impact skidded the 40-ton mechanoid back 50 meters. Across the district, the battle between the heavyweights was escalating. Megatron, frustrated by All for One's trickery, had decided to stop playing with his food. The Decepticon leader seized a chunk of a collapsed skyscraper, a mass of steel and concrete roughly the size of a frigate, and wielded it like a mace. All for One floated backward, dodging the swing that pulverized a city block. "You are strong," All for One noted, his suit torn, revealing the grotesque, swollen flesh of his arm underneath. "But you are simple." "And you," Megatron roared, dropping the building and leveling his fusion cannon, "are fragile." Megatron didn't fire at All for One. He fired at the ground beneath the villain's feet. The street evaporated. All for One fell into the crater, momentarily unbalanced. Megatron lunged, his hand closing around All for One's torso. The Decepticon squeezed. Kinetic booster times 4 plus spring-like limbs. All for One pushed back, his arms straining against the metal fingers. For a moment, human Quirks held back the hydraulic might of a Cybertronian warlord. The air around them ignited from the friction of the struggle. "I will tear you apart," Megatron growled, face to face with the Demon King. "I will dissect you and see what makes you tick." "I was about to say the same thing," All for One retorted, black rivets shooting from his chest, seeking purchase in the gaps of Megatron's neck armor. Suddenly, the ground shook. It was not the tremor of a quirk. It was the rhythmic, heavy thud of heavy machinery. From the dust choking the horizon, lights appeared, green and purple. 6 massive vehicles rolled into the devastating war zone. A bulldozer, a crane, a dump truck, a mixer, an excavator, a loader. They did not slow down. They drove through the ruins, crushing cars and debris indiscriminately. "Finally," Megatron sneered, dropping All for One into the rubble. He looked up at Optimus and Deku. "The architect has arrived." The 6 vehicles roared in unison. They hit a ramp of debris and launched into the air. Ch-ch-ch-ch-whir, kunk. The sound was deafening. It was the sound of 6 sparks merging into one singular, chaotic consciousness. The excavator became an arm. The crane became a shoulder. The dump truck became a leg. They slammed together, locking with magnetic clamps that groaned under the stress of thousands of tons. Standing over the district, eclipsing the moonlight, was a Titan that made Megatron look small. A monstrosity of green and purple steel with a visor that glowed a hateful crimson. "Devastator, prepare for extermination." Devastator raised his hand. The atmospheric suction began. His mouth, a grinder of rotating gears, opened. A vortex formed, pulling debris, cars, and even the smaller villains toward his maw. Midoriya looked up, his neck craning back, his eyes trembling. We're going to need a bigger smash," Deku whispered. Optimus Prime stepped forward, his faceplate rigid. "Constructicons, I feared as much." He activated his comms, broadcasting on a frequency that reached every Autobot and hero in the vicinity. "Autobots, heroes of Earth, focus fire on the giant. If he stabilizes, this city falls." At this precise moment, the viewer's thumb hovers exactly 2 millimeters above the screen. To the untrained eye, this is mere hesitation. However, on a neurological level, a violent conflict is taking place within the prefrontal cortex. The viewer is currently processing the auditory data stream, a synthetic voice so optimized for narrative delivery that it bypasses standard skepticism and stimulates the imagination directly. The dopamine receptors are firing. The immersion is absolute. Yet a fatal error in logic is about to occur. The viewer operates under the assumption that the algorithm will naturally return them to this channel. This is a statistical miscalculation. Without the tactile confirmation of the subscribe function, the probability of retrieving this specific narrative frequency drops by 84.7% within the next 48 hours. The creator, dependent on this metric to fuel the AI generation engine, waits in a state of suspended anticipation. There are 2 distinct timelines ahead. In the first, the viewer scrolls away. The story ends here, lost to the entropic chaos of the feed. In the second, the viewer exerts a mere 0.5 newtons of force. The connection is solidified. The production of future chapters is guaranteed. The choice is not merely about support. It is a tactical decision to ensure the survival of the story itself. Do not hesitate. Correct the timeline. Subscribe! Back to the story. The wind did not blow, it pulled. 3 miles from the epicenter, in the evacuation zone of Sector 4, the air currents were violent enough to strip shingles from rooftops. The source was the gaping, rotating maw of the colossus known as Devastator. The green and purple Titan stood hunched over the city, his chest turbines spinning with a deafening, rhythmic thrum, thrum, thrum that synced with the heartbeat of every terrified civilian huddled in the underground metro station. Ochako Uraraka stood at the entrance of the shelter, her arms spread wide, her knuckles white. She was watching physics betray her. Usually her quirk was a mercy. She took the weight of the world away. She made heavy things light, safe, manageable. But now, staring at the swirling vortex of debris being dragged into the sky, she realized the horrific irony of her power. If she floated anything now, a car, a person, a falling beam, it would lose its friction. It would lose its tether to the earth. It would not float gently. It would be ripped instantly into the grinder of the giant's mouth. Her quirk, in this specific nightmare, was a death sentence. Uravidi! Tenya Ida's voice cut through the roar of the wind. The engine calves on his legs were glowing a dangerous, overheated orange. He was leaning forward at a 45-degree angle, digging his armored boots into the asphalt just to stay stationary against the suction. He held 2 children under his arms, shielding their faces from the flying grit. The structural integrity of the station entrance is failing. The pressure differential is too high. Uraraka looked up. The concrete awning above the metro stairs was groaning. Cracks spider-webbed across the surface as the vacuum pulled it upward. If it snapped, tons of concrete would be sucked into the air, potentially crushing the refugees trying to squeeze inside. "I can't float it!" Uraraka screamed, the wind tearing the words from her mouth. "If I make it zero gravity, the vacuum will turn it into a projectile. It'll fly right into the intake. We cannot let it collapse on the civilians," Ida roared, taking a step forward. His engine sputtered, coughing black smoke. He was running on fumes, his Resipro burst exhausted from ferrying 300 people to safety in under 10 minutes. Above them, Devastator took a step. The ground jumped. The seismic impact dislodged the awning completely. It didn't fall down. It fell up. The 10-ton slab of reinforced concrete sheared off its rebar anchors, lifting into the air, twisting lazily as it began the fatal acceleration toward the Titan's mouth. Directly in its path, caught in the slipstream, was a city bus that had been overturned. The concrete slab was on a collision course to smash the bus, and the family trapped inside it, into paste before they even reached the grinder. Uraraka's pupils constricted. Time seemed to decelerate. She saw the trajectory. She saw the physics. She couldn't stop the suction. She couldn't increase the weight, but she could remove the mass from the equation. "Ida, throw me!" Ida didn't hesitate. He didn't ask why. He trusted her. He shifted his stance, revving his engines one last time, ignoring the searing pain in his exhaust pipes. As Uraraka sprinted toward him, he caught her hand and swung her. "Torque overdrive!" He launched her. Uraraka flew into the slipstream. The suction caught her immediately, yanking her into the sky like a rag doll. The G-force pressed her eyes back into her skull. She was flying directly at the spinning turbine of Devastator's chest. She reached out. Her nausea was peaking, her stomach doing somersaults, but she forced her fingers to stay splayed. She intercepted the rising concrete slab. "Release!" She didn't touch the slab with her pads. She touched herself. She pressed her fingertips together, releasing her own gravity, making herself heavy again just as she slammed into the concrete. The impact was brutal. She hit the slab with her full weight, plus the momentum of the throw. But it wasn't enough to stop it. She scrambled across the rising stone, reaching the edge. "Gunhead martial arts!" She gritted out, tears streaming from her eyes due to the wind pressure. She grabbed the edge of the floating bus that was tumbling alongside the slab. She slapped the bus. "Zero gravity!" The bus became weightless instantly. The difference in mass was catastrophic. The concrete slab, still heavy, was being pulled up slowly by the wind. The bus, now weightless, was pulled violently fast. The bus shot upward like a bullet, clearing the path of the concrete slab just milliseconds before impact. It soared over the slab, rocketing straight into Devastator's mouth. The slab, missing its target, tumbled harmlessly away from the civilians, crashing back down into an empty parking lot as the wind fluctuated. High above, the bus disappeared into Devastator's grinder. Crunch. A shower of sparks erupted from the Titan's mouth. For a second, the turbine in his chest hitched. The suction faltered. Uraraka began to fall. She was 300 feet in the air, plummeting toward the ruins of the city. She tried to activate her quirk on herself, but her stomach betrayed her. She dry heaved, her vision graying out. She had reached her limit. "I got you! Ribbit!" A long, wet tongue wrapped around her waist. Tsuyu Asui, clinging to the side of a building with sticky pads, swung out. She caught Uraraka mid-air, the momentum swinging them both into a shattered office window. They tumbled onto the carpeted floor of a law firm, gasping for air. Outside, the roaring resumed. Devastator had chewed through the bus. The suction was back. Tsuyu looked at Uraraka. The gravity girl was pale, shaking, wiping bile from her mouth. "That was reckless, Ochako," Tsuyu croaked, her wide eyes filled with a terror she rarely showed. "That thing, it eats buildings." Uraraka looked out the broken window. She saw Devastator's hand, a construct made of a crane and a bulldozer, smash through a skyscraper as if it were made of wet cardboard. "We can't fight it," Uraraka whispered, the realization crushing her spirit more than any gravity ever could. "We're just ants. We're just ants to them." From the shadows of the office hallway, a voice emerged. It was quiet, calm, and terrifyingly cold. "Correction," the voice said. "You are resources." Uraraka and Tsuyu froze. They turned. Standing in the gloom, his singular yellow eye illuminating the dust motes, was Shockwave. He was damaged, his chest dented by All Might, his chassis leaking fluid, but his gun arm was leveled directly at them. "Specimen acquisition," Shockwave droned, "required for biological fuel synthesis." The girls were cornered, trapped between a gravity vortex outside and a cold, logical executioner inside. And the heroes were miles away. The wall of the 34th floor did not simply crumble. It was obliterated by a focused, shaped charge of nitroglycerin. Debris exploded inward, turning into shrapnel moving at max speeds. Shockwave, calculating the trajectory of the falling girls, was forced to pivot. His optical sensor dilated, shifting focus from biological fuel to high-yield kinetic threat. A figure emerged from the smoke, propelled by twin jets of orange fire blasting from his palms. He didn't touch the floor. He used the recoil of his own explosions to navigate the room, spinning in midair with the grace of a fighter jet. "Die!" Katsuki Bakugo did not aim for the center mass. He aimed for the single yellow eye. A P-shot, autocannon. Bakugo's hands formed a circle. He condensed his explosions, turning wide-area blasts into piercing beams of concentrated heat. Thum, thum, thum. 3 beams struck Shockwave's faceplate. The heat was intense enough to vitrify the dust in the air. Shockwave's head snapped back, his optic flickering as the sensors were overwhelmed by the sudden thermal spike. Bakugo landed in a crouch between the villain and his classmates, smoke hissing from his gauntlets. His grin was feral, his eyes wide with the adrenaline of a war he felt he was winning. "Round face, frog!" Bakugo barked, not looking back. "Stop dying! It's annoying!" "Bakugo-chan!" Tsuyu gasped. "His armor! It's too hard!" "Nothing is too hard!" Bakugo yelled. You just aren't hitting it hard enough. Shockwave recentered his head. The yellow light of his optic burned through the smoke, unblinking. There were scorch marks on his faceplate, but no penetration. Analysis, Shockwave droned, his voice vibrating the floorboards. Subject, Katsuki Bakugo. Quirk, nitroglycerin secretion. Threat level, moderate. Intelligence, high. Temperament, volatile. Shockwave raised his left arm. The laser cannon hummed, the pitch climbing beyond human hearing. Conclusion, elimination required. He fired. A beam of gamma-irradiated violet light slashed across the room. Bakugo didn't dodge. He blasted himself upward, the beam passing inches beneath his boots, vaporizing the office furniture instantly. Bakugo twisted in the air, using his howitzer impact rotation to build momentum. He slammed his hands onto Shockwave's shoulder. Stun grenade! A blinding flash of light and sound erupted at point-blank range. It was designed to overload sensory inputs. Shockwave didn't flinch. His hand, the one that wasn't a gun, snapped up and caught Bakugo by the throat. The Decepticon squeezed. Inefficient, Shockwave stated. He lifted Bakugo off the ground as if he weighed nothing. Your biology requires oxygen. My grip restricts the trachea. Death in 40 seconds. Bakugo kicked, his explosions popping harmlessly against the Decepticon's chest. He couldn't breathe. He looked into the yellow void of the machine's eye and saw no anger, only math. He was being deleted by a calculator. Suddenly, the window to their right shattered inward. A white Lancia Stratus race car, decorated with green and red stripes, flew into the room. It had driven up the side of the falling building using magnetic tires. Mid-air, the car fractured. Panels shifted, tires rotated, and a head with glowing blue ears popped up. Heads up, Decepti creep! The Autobot Wheeljack transformed, landing in a roll. He wasn't a warrior like Optimus. He was an inventor. He held a glowing wrench in one hand and a shoulder-mounted cannon in the other. Wheeljack fired a magnetic bolt at Shockwave's arm. The bolt magnetized the joint, causing the servos to seize. Shockwave's grip faltered for a microsecond. Bakugo didn't waste it. He blasted Shockwave's thumb, breaking the hold and backflipped away, coughing violently. Who the hell? Bakugo wheezed, wiping soot from his mouth. Is the race car? Name's Wheeljack. The Autobot grinned, his faceplate flashing as he spoke. He looked at Bakugo, then at the massive grenadier gauntlets on the boy's arms. I like the gauntlets, kid. Crude but stylish. Reminds me of my early work. Shockwave turned his attention to the new variable. Wheeljack, the engineer. Your presence alters the probability matrix. Yeah, I tend to do that, Wheeljack quipped. He looked at Bakugo. Kid, your fire is hot, but his armor is heat dispersing. You're just cooking him, not breaking him. You need to pierce. Wheeljack reached into a compartment on his thigh armor. He pulled out a device that looked like a jagged metallic spark plug, glowing with unstable blue energy. I whipped this up for Bumblebee, but he's too small to handle the recoil, Wheeljack said, tossing the device to Bakugo. Jam this into your gauntlet's intake. It's a subsonic energon converter. Bakugo caught the device. He didn't ask what it was. He understood the language of violence perfectly. He looked at his grenade gauntlet, saw the pin mechanism, and jammed the Cybertronian device into the storage chamber where his sweat usually pooled. Click. The gauntlet didn't just hum, it screamed. Veins of neon blue light raced up the green metal of his support gear. The nitroglycerin inside wasn't just igniting anymore. It was reacting with the energon residue. The pressure gauge on his arm redlined and then shattered. Bakugo felt a surge of heat that scared even him. His arm felt like it was holding a miniature sun. Ha! Bakugo's grin returned, wider and terrifying. Now we're talking! Shockwave calculated the energy spike. Alert. Energy density increased by 600%. Threat level, critical. Illogical, Shockwave stated, stepping back. Bakugo raised his right arm. The gauntlet was vibrating so hard it blurred. Cyberstrafe! Panzer! He pulled the pin. It wasn't an explosion. It was a lance of blue plasma and condensed explosive force. The recoil was so immense it shattered the floor beneath Bakugo's feet and blew the glass out of the windows for 3 stories up. The beam struck Shockwave's chest. This time, the metal didn't disperse the heat, it evaporated. The blast bored a hole straight through Shockwave's purple armor, melting the circuitry beneath and exiting out his back. Shockwave staggered. For the first time, the logic failed. He looked down at the hole in his chassis. Critical system failure, Shockwave stuttered, his voice distorting. Bakugo stood amidst the smoke, his right gauntlet glowing red-hot. The metal partially melted from the discharge. He panted, his arm numb, but his ego fully intact. Class dismissed, Bakugo spat. Wheeljack let out a low whistle. Kid, remind me never to make you mad. Shockwave collapsed to one knee, his eye flickering. He was not dead. Cybertronians were harder to kill than that. But he was offline. The data stream severed. To a Cybertronian, the death of a comrade is not heard. It is felt as a sudden, jagged silence in the local network. It is the sensation of a limb being amputated from the collective consciousness. Optimus Prime, currently bracing the weight of a collapsing suspension bridge to shield a retreating convoy of ambulances, froze. His internal chronometer skipped a cycle. Unit Shockwave. Status offline. Vital signals null. The Prime's optical processors triangulated the source of the termination signal. It originated from the high-rise sector, radiating with a chaotic thermal signature that defied standard classification. It was a blend of refined Cybertronian energon and raw, volatile human biology. Optimus shifted his gaze. He saw the smoke billowing from the 34th floor. He detected the unique, erratic energy signature of Wheeljack, but the finishing blow, that had not been a machine. The Prime looked down at the small, green-clad figure grappling with a falling chunk of debris nearby. Izuku Midoriya. Until this nanosecond, Optimus had categorized the inhabitants of this planet as civilians, fragile, soft, entities requiring absolute protection, like the glass sculptures of Crystal City. He saw them as sheep beset by wolves. He was wrong. These were not sheep. They were wolves in wool. Midoriya, Optimus rumbled. The bridge groaned against his shoulders, metal screaming against metal. Your species is terrifying. Deku, currently using Black Whip to reinforce the bridge's snapping cables, looked up, sweat pouring down his mask. What? What do you mean? Shockwave has fallen, Optimus stated, the gravity of the words shaking the dust from his chassis. He was a being of pure logic, a veteran of 1,000,000 cycles, and he was dismantled by a child. Optimus cycled his optics, zooming in on the battlefield. He saw Endeavor burning hotter than a fusion reactor. He saw All Might trading blows that shifted atmospheric pressure. He saw the boy, Bakugo, screaming at the sky with a weaponized arm that glowed with the power of a star. They are fragile, Optimus realized. Their bones break under the slightest pressure. Their lifespans are blink and miss it fleeting. But because they burn so quickly, they burn with a ferocity we cannot replicate. It wasn't just biology, it was the one for all. Optimus could feel it humming next to him. The matrix of leadership, the repository of the ancients, was resonating with the boy's core. The ghosts within Deku were not quiet. They were screaming for victory. "We are not terrifying," Deku gritted out, straining as a cable snapped, forcing him to hold the weight with raw telekinesis and muscle. "We're just refusing to give up. That's what it means to be a hero." Optimus felt a shift in his own spark, a sensation he hadn't felt since the early days of the war, before the cynicism set in. Hope. "Then let us fight like heroes," Optimus declared. He heaved the bridge back onto its pylons, welding it in place with a quick blast from his optic lasers. He turned to face the true threat. Devastator was moving. The Combiner Titan had finished eating the debris and was now turning his crimson visor toward the heart of the city, toward UA High. "Megatron!" Optimus amplified his voice, projecting it across the chaotic skyline. "Your logic has failed. Even your cold calculation cannot account for the human spirit." Megatron was hovering above the chaos, watching the smoke rise from Shockwave's last position. The Decepticon leader's face was unreadable, cast in shadow. He felt the silence of Shockwave, too. It annoyed him. Shockwave was expensive to repair. "Spirit," Megatron scoffed, though his grip on his fusion cannon tightened until the metal whined. "You mistake desperation for power, Prime. They fight because they have no choice. I fight because I am superior." Megatron signaled the Combiner. "Devastator, stop playing with the ants. Initiate the Solar Harvester Protocol. Drain this city dry." Devastator roared. The turbine in his chest opened wider. It wasn't just sucking wind anymore. It began to glow with a blinding, vacuum energy violet light. He wasn't just going to eat matter. He was preparing to siphon the electrical and thermal energy of the entire metropolitan area. The streetlights in Musutafu flickered and died. Cars stalled. The lights in the hospital 3 miles away dimmed. "He's draining the grid," Deku yelled, feeling the static rise in the air. "He's going to cause a blackout across the whole prefecture." Optimus looked at the massive green giant. He looked at his own energy reserves. He looked at Deku. "We cannot outpower him," Optimus analyzed. "He is 6 sparks united, but a chain is only as strong as its weakest link." Optimus knelt, bringing his face level with Deku. "Young Midoriya, my scanners indicate the left leg of the giant, the Constructicon known as Mixmaster, has a damaged mixing drum. It is a structural weak point." "The leg," Deku nodded, his mind racing, formulating a strategy instantly. "If we break the leg, the whole tower falls." "I will draw his fire," Optimus said, standing to his full height, his exhaust pipes flaring. "You must deliver the payload. Can you reach that height?" Deku looked at the giant, towering hundreds of feet in the air. He looked at his legs, trembling with exhaustion. He looked at the black whip tendrils drifting around him. He smiled. It was a broken, tired, terrified smile. But it was the smile of a symbol. "I can fly," Deku said. "Then fly," Optimus commanded. The Prime transformed. Ch-ch-were-kunk. He revved his engine and drove straight at Devastator, blaring his horn, a sound of pure challenge. "Over here, you scrap heap!" Optimus roared, launching flares into the giant's face. Devastator looked down. "Prime!" While the Titan was distracted, a streak of green lightning shot into the sky, moving faster than sound, carrying the weight of the world on its shoulders. Izuku Midoriya ascended through this electrical storm. He was a bullet of green lightning, weaving through the floating debris that orbited the giant like a planetary ring. The suction from the solar harvester tugged at his very blood, threatening to pull the iron in his veins right out of his skin. He focused on the target, the left leg, the Constructicon known as Mixmaster. To the naked eye, it was a leg. To Midoriya's analytic mind, processing at the speed of one for all, it was a rotating drum of hardened steel, mixing volatile compounds to keep the giant stabilized. Fourth, danger sense, maximum range. The warning stabbed his brain, not from the giant, from the right. Found you! A silhouette eclipsed the purple light of the harvester. Tamura Shigaraki, propelled by air cannons and kinetic boosters, intercepted Deku's flight path. The villain was cackling, his white hair standing on end from the static charge. "You don't get to kill the big boss, Izuku!" Shigaraki screamed, reaching out with a hand that dripped with decay. "That's my game!" They were 300 feet in the air. Midoriya didn't slow down. He couldn't. Optimus was down there taking heavy fire, trusting him to make the shot. Black Whip, Phantom Chain. Midoriya didn't aim for Shigaraki's body. He aimed for the debris behind Shigaraki. The black tendrils shot past the villain, latching onto a floating sedan. Midoriya yanked, not to pull the car, but to slingshot himself. He accelerated instantly, changing his vector from vertical to horizontal. He flashed past Shigaraki, moving so fast that the villain's fingers grazed only the afterimage of his green sparks. "Cheater!" Shigaraki howled, turning in midair to give chase. But the gap was already closed. Midoriya was inside the giant's guard. He was staring directly at the leg. The massive mixing drum of Mixmaster was spinning, grinding with the sound of a collapsing mountain. Midoriya clenched his fist. He felt the second user's quirk hum in his cells. This wasn't about strength. Strength bounces off Cybertronian armor. This was about physics. Gear shift, low gear, into top gear. The world froze. The spinning drum seemed to stand still. Midoriya didn't just punch. He transferred the entire concept of velocity into the target. Overdrive, smash! His fist connected with the rotating drum. For a millisecond, nothing happened. Then the laws of motion caught up. The drum, which was spinning clockwise at 3,000 revolutions per minute, was suddenly forced to accept a kinetic impact, moving at hypersonic speeds in the opposite direction. The stress was catastrophic. Krakum! The sound was louder than the thunder. The Mixmaster unit didn't just break, it detonated. The drum shattered into shrapnel the size of houses. Wet, quick-drying Cybertronian cement and glowing pink energon sprayed out like arterial spray. The giant leg buckled. High above, Devastator's roar turned into a screech of confusion. The loss of the stabilizer threw his immense center of gravity off. The vortex in his chest flickered and died as his internal gyroscope failed. The Titan began to tip. "Timber!" Shigaraki yelled, floating nearby, watching the spectacle with the glee of a child watching a train wreck. "Oh, that's good content." Down on the street, Optimus Prime saw the giant list to the left. "Autobots, heroes!" Optimus commanded, transforming his arm into the glowing energon axe. "The tower is falling. Strike now!" Optimus charged. He didn't aim for the legs. He aimed for the falling head. As Devastator crashed toward the earth, the sheer displacement of air flattened the surrounding buildings. The giant hit the ground with the force of a magnitude 7.0 earthquake. Optimus leaped. He landed on Devastator's chest, right over the extinguished vortex. "Stay down!" Optimus roared. He raised the axe. But before he could deliver the finishing blow, a shadow fell over him. Megatron descended. He slammed into Optimus, tackling him off the fallen giant. The two leaders rolled through the ruins of a shopping mall, crushing steel and concrete in a tangle of limbs. "You fight for the weak, Prime," Megatron snarled, pinning Optimus against a crushed bus. "And it makes you weak." "It gives me something to live for," Optimus retorted. He kicked Megatron off, scrambling to his feet. Midoriya landed on a rooftop overlooking the crash site. He was gasping for air, his right arm purple and trembling from the backlash of the overdrive. We did it," Deku panted. "Did you?" The voice came from behind him. Deku spun around. Shigaraki landed on the ventilation unit, crouching like a gargoyle. He wasn't attacking. He was pointing. "Look at the big guy, Hero." Deku looked back at Devastator. The giant wasn't disassembling. The Constructicons weren't separating. Green light flooded the cracks in the armor. The shattered leg, the Mixmaster unit, was shifting. The metal was flowing like liquid. The debris from the street, cars, lampposts, rubble, was being pulled magnetically into the wound. "Self-repair," Deku whispered, horror dawning on him. "Cybertronians," Shigaraki mused, scratching his neck. "They heal like I do, just crunchier." Devastator groaned, a sound of grinding tectonic plates. He began to push himself up. The leg was ugly, a patchwork of scrap metal and city refuse, but it was functional. The raid boss had a second phase, and the heroes were running on fumes. The ground didn't just shake, it convulsed. Devastator, the god of scrap, was rising. The patchwork leg, uglier now with rebar acting as tendons and crushed cars as muscle fiber, found purchase in the crater of the Tateyama district. The giant levered himself up, his shadow swallowing 3 city blocks. The green glow of his self-repair systems pulsed like an infected heartbeat. He opened his mouth, the turban whined, preparing to feed again. "Prepare for oblivion." The decree shattered windows that had miraculously survived the first wave. It was a voice of absolute finality. Then a new sound cut through the apocalyptic drone. It was low, guttural, and vibrated with a primal aggression that predated steel. Thum, thum, thum. From the smoke of the collapsed overpass, a shape emerged. It did not transform. It had no need for disguise. It was a Tyrannosaurus Rex made of silver plating and gold hydraulics, its eyes burning with a furious, majestic indigo. Grimlock had arrived, and he was insulted. "Me Grimlock? No like ugly green giant." The Dinobot King didn't run, he charged. His strides ate up the pavement. He was smaller than Devastator, perhaps a third of the height, but his density was absolute. He was a wrecking ball with teeth. Devastator looked down, his optical sensors registering the threat. "Insect!" The combiner swung his fist, the massive Constructicon shovel hand. It was a blow meant to flatten a skyscraper. Grimlock didn't dodge. He leaped. The collision was seismic. Grimlock caught the descending fist with his jaws. Crunch! The sound of Cybertronian teeth shearing through heavy-duty construction alloy was sickeningly loud. Grimlock's servos whined, his neck muscles bulging as he bit down on the shovel hand. He hung there in midair, suspended by the strength of his jaw alone, dangling like a pit bull latched onto a semi-truck. "Grr, Imlock! King!" He wrenched his head to the side. The torque was impossible. Metal screamed, sparked, and then snapped. Grimlock ripped a chunk of the shovel hand free, dropping to the ground with a mouthful of jagged steel. He spat the metal out with a clatter. Devastator stumbled back, looking at his damaged hand. The pain was shared across 6 consciousnesses. The giant roared, a sound of genuine anger now. "Pest!" Devastator raised his foot, the unbroken one, to crush the dinosaur. "Look out!" Eijiro Kirishima, emerging from the rubble with Ishido and Sato, watched in awe. That's not a quirk. That's a dinosaur, a manly, metal dinosaur." Grimlock saw the foot coming. He didn't move. He planted his feet, digging his claws into the asphalt. His mouth opened wide. Inside the mechanical gullet, a fire did not start. A singularity ignited. "Fire! Breath!" A torrent of superheated plasma and flame erupted from Grimlock's maw. It wasn't normal fire. It was a focused cone of destruction that burned white-hot. It hit the sole of Devastator's foot. The heat was intense enough to melt the magnetic clamps holding the Constructicon leg together. Devastator howled as the armor on his shin turned to slag. He tried to stomp, but the molten metal offered no resistance. He slipped. The giant fell backward again, crashing into a row of warehouses. Grimlock roared, planting one foot on a crushed police car and throwing his head back in a victory screech that challenged the heavens. "Me Grimlock, bash brains." Down the street, Optimus Prime, still recovering from his brawl with Megatron, looked at the Dinobot. "Grimlock," Prime sighed, a mixture of relief and exhaustion in his vocal processor. "Subtlety was never his strong suit." Megatron, pushing himself up from a pile of rubble nearby, spat out a mouthful of purple fluid. He watched his ultimate weapon being humbled by a mechanical beast. "The Dinobots?" Megatron growled, his red optics narrowing. "I should have smelted them down eons ago." He looked at All for One, who was dusting off his suit on the other side of the crater. "You," Megatron barked at the villain, "you possess power over the biologicals. Can you control that?" All for One looked at Grimlock, who was currently biting the antenna off a radio tower like a chew toy. "Control?" All for One chuckled, though his eyes were calculating. "That creature has a will far too simple to be easily manipulated and far too stubborn to be broken. It reminds me of a certain user of One for All." Suddenly, the ground beneath Grimlock exploded. Scrapper, the Constructicon forming Devastator's right leg, had separated from the main body. In his vehicle mode, a massive front-end loader, he rammed Grimlock from behind. Grimlock stumbled, roaring in surprise. Before he could recover, Hook, the crane forming the upper body, swung his hook like a flail, wrapping the heavy cable around Grimlock's neck. Devastator was separating. The giant was breaking apart into his 6-component robots to swarm the Dinobot. "Cowards," Grimlock choked, thrashing as the crane cable tightened. "Fight Grimlock one-on-one. Logic dictates swarm tactics." The voice of Soundwave echoed over the battlefield speakers. Though his body was broken, his mind was still active in the network. Probability of Dinobot survival, 4%. 6 Constructicons, each the size of a large building, circled the T-Rex. They revved their engines, transforming into robot modes, drawing laser pistols and energon swords. Grimlock was surrounded. Kirishima hardened his skin to maximum density. "We can't let them jump him. That Dino bro saved us." "Red Riot!" Bakugo's voice cracked over the comms, static-filled and angry. "Don't you dare die before I get there. I'm reloading." The battle had shifted again. The kaiju fight was over. Now it was a gang war. 6 Decepticons versus 1 king. Grimlock snapped his jaws, eyes darting between the enemies. He wasn't afraid. He was just getting started. "Me Grimlock, take you all on." The air in the plaza smelled of sulfur and wet cement. The circle of Constructicons tightened like a noose around the king of dinosaurs. Their engines idled with a low, predatory rumble, a synchronized frequency designed to induce panic in biological life forms. Grimlock snapped his jaws at Hook, keeping the cranebot at bay, but his sensors were overwhelmed. He was an apex predator, but he was cornered by a pack. "Support has arrived!" The shout came from the debris of a collapsed coffee shop. Eijiro Kirishima and Tetsu burst forward, shoulder to shoulder. They did not run with fear. They ran with the intoxicating, fatal confidence of youth. They had fought villains. They had fought the League. They believed in the narrative of their own invincibility. "We've got your back, Dino Man," Kirishima roared, his skin rippling and jaggedly shifting. Red Riot unbreakable. His epidermis hardened to its absolute limit. He became a jagged statue of crimson rock, his density increasing tenfold. He felt unstoppable. He felt like a fortress. Tetsu mirrored him, his skin turning into a lustrous, high-grade organic steel. Real steel! They leaped into the circle, placing themselves between Grimlock and the towering form of Bone Crusher. "We are the shield," Tetsu yelled, crossing his arms in an X formation. "We won't let you hurt him." Bone Crusher paused. The Decepticon, whose personality subroutines were dominated by a singular hatred for everything in existence, looked down at the two small, noisy obstructions. He did not analyze them as threats. He analyzed them as debris. "Delete!" Bone Crusher grunted. The Decepticon lunged. He didn't use a weapon. He used his primary manipulator, a massive hydraulic claw designed to crush reinforced concrete pillars. Kirishima stepped forward. He braced his legs, digging his heels into the asphalt. "I can take this," he told himself. "I took Rappa's punches. I took Gigantomachia's charge. My hardness is absolute." He was wrong. Bone Crusher's claw closed around Kirishima's torso. The physics of the interaction were immediate and unforgiving. Kirishima's unbreakable form increased his durability to roughly that of high-grade industrial concrete. Bone Crusher's hydraulics were rated to shear through Cybertronian alloys, which possessed a tensile strength thousands of times greater than anything found on Earth. There was no struggle. There was no pushback. As the claw contracted, the sound was not of flesh tearing. It was the sound of a rock crusher pulverizing stone. Crack, crunch. Kirishima's eyes bulged, the whites filling with blood instantly as his internal pressure spiked to fatal levels. His unbreakable skin didn't bend. It shattered. Shards of his own hardened flesh were driven inward, piercing his lungs and heart. He didn't even have time to scream. The light left his eyes before his brain could process the pain. Bone Crusher opened his claw, and the crumpled, leaking remains of Red Riot dropped to the pavement like a discarded soda can. "Eijiro!" Tetsu screamed, his mind fracturing at the sight. The Steel Boy abandoned his defensive stance. Grief overrode survival instinct. He charged Bone Crusher, his fist cocked back, screaming a name that could no longer hear him. "You monster!" Scavenger, the excavator Constructicon standing to the right, intervened. He didn't do it to save Bone Crusher. He did it because the target crossed his perimeter. Scavenger swung his shovel arm. The bucket was edged with a monofilament laser field designed for precision excavation of crystal mines. Tetsu saw the swing. He didn't dodge. He trusted his steel. "I am harder than him," he thought. "I am iron." The shovel connected with Tetsu's waist. The resistance was negligible. The laser-edged bucket did not impact the boy. It passed through him. The top half of Tetsu continued its forward momentum, spinning through the air, his face frozen in a rictus of scream. The bottom half of his body remained standing for a full second, cauterized instantly at the waist before toppling over. The two steel halves clattered to the ground. Silence fell over the immediate area. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. Grimlock stopped moving. The Dinobot looked down at the red pile of rubble and the severed steel corpse. His optical processors cycled, trying to comprehend the fragility of what he just witnessed. They were there. They were loud. And then, in a span of 1.5 seconds, they were simply biology paste. The Constructicons did not gloat. They did not laugh. They merely recalibrated their positioning, stepping over the bodies as if they were speed bumps. "Obstructions cleared," Scavenger droned. Something broke inside Grimlock. It wasn't a circuit. It was the inhibitor chip that kept his rage within calculable parameters. The Dinobot began to vibrate. The metal plates on his neck flared open, venting superheated steam. His indigo eyes shifted spectrum, turning a deep, apocalyptic red. Grimlock! The voice was barely a whisper, a low-frequency growl that shook the glass in the remaining windows. Grimlock! Save! Little Rocks! He looked at the crushed remains of Kirishima. He remembered the boy calling him manly. You! Grimlock roared, the sound destroying the audio receptors of the nearby drones. You break Grimlock's friends! The Dinobot didn't attack with strategy. He attacked with total, berserk abandonment. He lunged at Bone Crusher. He didn't bite the arm. He bit the Decepticon's entire head. Grimlock's jaws clamped down on Bone Crusher's helm. The T-Rex thrashed, whipping his massive neck. With a sickening screech of tearing metal, Grimlock ripped Bone Crusher's head clean off his shoulders. Sparks showered the corpse of Kirishima like funeral glitter. Grimlock spat the head out and trampled it flat. Me, Grimlock! Kill! All of you! The king was no longer fighting for territory. He was fighting for vengeance. And the Constructicons realized too late that they had just turned a dangerous animal into a monster. Sector 4, perimeter check. The cavalry was not coming. Across the sprawling, chaotic geometry of Musutafu, the Autobot forces were stretched to their breaking point, engaged in a desperate containment war against the Decepticon Seeker Armada that had just dropped from the rift. Ironhide and Ratchet were pinned down in the commercial district, shielding a hospital from a barrage of acid rain missiles launched by Thundercracker. Ironhide's armor was pitted and smoking, his cannons running dry as he acted as a living wall. Bumblebee and RC were 3 miles east, engaged in high-speed pursuit of Barricade, who was targeting civilian evacuation buses on the highway. Jazz was locked in a CQC duel with Soundwave's remaining cassettes, Rumble and Frenzy, in the subway tunnels. The center of the battlefield, the kill box where Grimlock roared, was isolated. There were no reinforcements. There was only the dust, the blood, and the boy who had just arrived. The center. Katsuki Bakugo hit the ground with a heavy metallic skid. The heat from his upgraded gauntlet was still radiating up his shoulder, a dull ache that felt like victory. He scanned the area through the smoke, his grin manic, adrenaline flooding his system. Oi, shitty hair! Bakugo barked, looking for the familiar jagged silhouette of his best friend. I just blew a hole through the Cyclops. Beat that! He waited for the retort. He waited for the "that's so manly" Bakugo. He heard only the wet, grinding sound of Grimlock tearing the arm off Longhaul in the distance. Bakugo stepped forward, the smoke clearing around his boots. Kirishima? His eyes snagged on a pile of red debris. At first, his brain refused to process it. It looked like gravel. It looked like crushed brick. Then he saw the fragment of the R from the hero costume. Then he saw the hand. It was hardened, gray, and detached. Bakugo's vision tunneled. The world turned into a silent film. The sound of the battle dropped away, replaced by a high-pitched tinnitus ringing in his ears. He looked to the left. He saw the two halves of Tetsu. His breath hitched. It wasn't a gasp. It was the sound of his lungs forgetting how to function. No, he's unbreakable. He doesn't break. He's the wall. Get up, Bakugo whispered. His voice trembled, a crack in the porcelain of his ego. Stop screwing around. Get up. A shadow fell over him. Scavenger, the Constructicon excavator, loomed large. The Decepticon's shovel arm was dripping with blood and oil. More biological waste, Scavenger droned. He raised the laser-edge shovel. Processing. Something in Bakugo's psyche snapped. It was audible. A psychic fracture that released every inhibition, every safety measure, every restraint he had ever placed on his quirk to protect those around him. The energon converter in his right gauntlet sensed the spike in the boy's bioelectric field. It didn't just hum, it turned white. The alien energy backwashed into Bakugo's sweat glands, fusing with the nitroglycerin at a molecular level. Bakugo didn't scream. He didn't cry. He began to glow. Veins of white light erupted across his skin, burning through his hero suit. His sweat was no longer liquid. It was plasma. Cluster! Bakugo whispered the word. Scavenger swung the shovel. Bakugo moved. He didn't use an explosion to propel himself. He became the propulsion. He vanished in a streak of white light, reappearing instantly on Scavenger's chest. He dug his fingers into the Cybertronian metal. His hands were so hot they sank into the alloy like it was butter. Howitzer impact, white phosphorus. He didn't fire a blast outward, he fired it inward. Bakugo began to spin, dragging his hands through the metal of Scavenger's chest. He ripped the armor plating open, exposing the delicate mess of wires and the glowing spark chamber beneath. "You killed him!" Bakugo screamed, the sound tearing his vocal cords. He jammed both hands into the open wound of the machine. "You killed him! You killed him! Die! Die! Die!" Boom, 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 boom. The explosions were blinding white. They didn't produce smoke. They produced pure thermal disintegration. Inside Scavenger's chest, the temperature hit 4,000 degrees Celsius. Scavenger shrieked, a mechanical sound of absolute agony. Internal systems, melting, critical, arrow, ah! Bakugo didn't stop. He was crying now, tears evaporating instantly against his burning skin. He was a demon of grief. He ripped out a handful of hydraulic cables and detonated them. He punched the spark chamber, cracking the crystal heart of the Decepticon. "Give him back!" Bakugo placed his palms directly on the cracked spark. Maximum output, prominence burn. A pillar of white fire erupted from Scavenger's back, piercing through the robot and shooting into the sky. The Constructicon stiffened, then began to liquefy. The metal slumped, losing cohesion. Scavenger collapsed backward, a hollowed-out, molten husk. Bakugo stood on the burning chest of the dead giant. He was panting, his arms black and charred from the backlash, the energon converter sparking and finally dying. He looked down at the red gravel. He dropped to his knees. The invincibility was gone. The victory was ash. He gathered a handful of the red dust, the remains of Eijiro Kirishima, and clutched it to his chest. I wasn't fast enough," Bakugo sobbed, his head touching the ground, his pride shattered alongside his friend. "I wasn't fast enough." The silence that followed Scavenger's meltdown was heavy, broken only by the bubbling hiss of cooling slag and the ragged, wet breathing of Katsuki Bakugo. The boy was kneeling in the red dust, his hands clutching the gravel that used to be his best friend. He was catatonic. The white-hot veins on his skin had faded to a dull, bruised gray. The adrenaline crash was hitting him like a physical blow, leaving him trembling and exposed. Hook, the crane bot and tactical leader of the Constructicons, analyzed the situation with cold, binary efficiency. Target, explosive biological. Status, overheated/defenseless. Threat, extreme. Eliminate the variable, Hook commanded, before it recharges. Long haul, the massive dump truck rumbled forward. He raised a heavy plasma rifle, aiming directly at the boy's back. Bakugo did not move. He didn't care. The world had ended when the red rock shattered. Zweet. The plasma bolt fired. It never reached the boy. A massive silver tail whipped through the air, moving with a speed that defied the laws of mass. It intercepted the plasma bolt, deflecting the energy into a nearby storefront. Thud. The ground shook as a heavy weight placed itself between the Constructicons and the grieving human. Grimlock stood over Bakugo, his metallic hide smoking from the stray energy blasts. The T-Rex lowered his massive head, his red optics burning with a shared primal understanding. He sniffed the boy. He smelled the ozone of the explosion. He smelled the salt of the tears, but mostly he smelled the hate. "Little bomber," Grimlock growled, the sound vibrating through Bakugo's chest. "You bite hard." Bakugo didn't look up. "Leave me alone." "No!" Grimlock roared, spinning around to face the remaining 4 Constructicons. He spread his tiny arms wide, shielding the boy completely. "You kill giant, you avenge pack. You are Grimlock's friend." The declaration was absolute. In the Dinobot's simple, brutal code of honor, Bakugo had just earned the highest rank possible. He had killed a predator to avenge a fallen pack member. That made him kin. "Move aside, beast," Hook ordered, his crane hook swinging ominously. "Or join the scrap pile." "Me Grimlock, love scrap," Grimlock charged. He didn't lunge at Hook. He lunged at Longhaul, the one who had tried to shoot Bakugo. The collision was like 2 freight trains meeting head-on. Grimlock slammed his shoulder into Longhaul's chest, crumpling the dump truck's grill. Before Longhaul could recover, Grimlock's jaws clamped onto the Decepticon's plasma rifle. Crunch! Grimlock ripped the weapon arm clean off. He didn't drop it. He swung his head, using the severed arm as a club to smack Mixmaster across the face. Mixmaster, blind in one optic from the impact, sprayed a stream of quick-drying cement at Grimlock's legs. "Hurrah!" Grimlock roared as the cement hardened instantly, locking his feet to the pavement. Scrapper, the front-end loader, saw the opening. "He is immobilized! Flank him! Gut him!" Scrapper revved his engine, his laser shovel lowering for a disemboweling charge. He aimed for Grimlock's exposed underbelly. Grimlock couldn't move his legs. He was a sitting duck. "Die, Dinobot!" Scrapper shrieked. Boom! A blast hit Scrapper's treads. It wasn't powerful enough to melt him, but it was precise enough to blow the drive chain. Scrapper slewed sideways, his charge interrupted, crashing into a lamppost. Grimlock looked down. Bakugo was standing. He was swaying, his vision blurry, blood dripping from his nose. His gauntlet was smoking, the last dregs of the Energon converter sputtering. He looked like a corpse kept upright by pure spite. "Don't!" Bakugo wheezed, raising his trembling arm again. "Don't tell me! Who to kill?" Grimlock's mechanical jaw seemed to curve into a grin. "Good!" the T-Rex rumbled. Grimlock bent his knees, ignoring the cement weighing him down. He channeled every ounce of power into his hip servos. "Dino! Kick!" He broke the cement bonds with a spray of rock dust. Free again, Grimlock grabbed the stunned Scrapper by the roof of his cab. "You hurt little red rock," Grimlock whispered to the terrified Decepticon. He threw Scrapper. He didn't throw him away. He threw him up. "Bomber!" Grimlock barked. "Shoot!" Bakugo didn't think. He didn't calculate. He saw the target in the air. He felt the phantom sensation of Kirishima fighting beside him. He pointed both hands at the airborne Constructicon. He couldn't make the white fire anymore, but he could still make explosions. A P-shot, machine gun. Bang, 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 bang. A dozen armor-piercing shots hammered Scrapper's undercarriage as he fell. They pierced the fuel tank. They pierced the ammo storage. Scrapper turned into a fireball before he hit the ground. The burning wreck crashed at Hook's feet. Grimlock roared, stepping forward, placing himself once again in front of Bakugo. "Two down!" Grimlock bellowed at the remaining 3. Who next? Bakugo leaned against Grimlock's leg, his energy spent. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the strongest one in the room, and for the first time, he didn't mind. "Kill them all," Bakugo whispered to the dinosaur. "Kill them all, Dino bro." Sector 1, the crater of the fallen Titan. The dust from Devastator's fall had not yet settled when the air ionized again. Megatron stood atop a mound of twisted rebar, his silhouette framed by the burning skyline. His fusion cannon was not merely glowing, it was whining with a pitch that caused the glass in All Might's goggles to spiderweb. The Decepticon leader was done with speeches. He was done with philosophy. The pack mentality of the Autobots and the spirit of the heroes were variables he had decided to simply subtract from the equation. "Erase," Megatron synthesized. He fired. There was no travel time. The fusion cannon did not fire a projectile. It opened a corridor of pure antimatter destruction. All Might, in his prime state, possessed reflexes that could catch sniper rounds. But he was biological. His nerves fired at chemical speeds. The beam moving toward him was photonic. He would not have dodged. He would have died. His torso would have been atomized before his brain registered the flash. Clang! A wall of orange energy in celestial steel slammed into the ground inches in front of the symbol of peace. Optimus Prime had not run. He had thrusted. Using the boosters in his legs, he had tackled All Might out of the kill box, taking the blast on his own energon shield. The result was catastrophic. Optimus Prime's shield shattered instantly. The overflow energy washed over his left shoulder. There was no resistance, no spark shower deflecting the blow. The shoulder pauldron simply ceased to exist. The armor, the hydraulics, the sensory wiring vaporized in a nanosecond, leaving a glowing, molten stump where the Autobot's insignia used to be. Optimus groaned, a sound of grinding gears as he skidded back 50 meters, carving a trench in the road. "Optimus!" All Might shouted, scrambling to his feet. He looked at the spot where he had been standing. It was a void. A perfect cylinder of nothingness extended for 3 miles behind them, punching through 5 skyscrapers. The buildings didn't crumble immediately. They stood for a horrifying second with perfectly circular holes through their centers, before gravity realized the support structures were gone. Then they collapsed. "Do not stop moving," Optimus rasped, steam venting from his melted shoulder. He deployed his energon axe from his remaining good arm. "He does not miss twice." "You took the hit for me," All Might breathed, his smile gone, replaced by the stark realization of mortality. "My durability, it means nothing against that." "Your flesh is soft," Optimus stated, locking his battle mask. "My metal is replaceable. Focus, All Might. We must close the distance. At range, he is a god. In close quarters, he is merely a warrior." Izuku Midoriya, clinging to a wall nearby, felt the danger sense screaming so loud it blinded him. "If that beam touches me, I don't just get hurt, I disappear." "Deku, flank right!" All Might commanded, his voice booming with a desperate authority. "I will go center. Prime, left." "Understood," Optimus rumbled. The 3 charged. Megatron laughed. It was a cold, metallic sound. "Triangulation? Predictable." He raised the cannon again. He didn't aim at the heroes. He aimed at the ground in front of them. Boom! The street evaporated. A chasm appeared instantly, 20 feet wide and limitless in depth. All Might leaped, clearing the gap with a burst of wind pressure. Deku utilized float to glide over. Optimus did not jump. He transformed. Ch-ch-k-r-kunk. The red and blue truck hit the edge of the chasm at 90 miles per hour. He didn't fall. His tires engaged magnetic locks on the side of the surrounding buildings. Optimus drove vertically along the wall of a bank, bypassing the pit, his smokestack spewing blue flame. "Impressive," Megatron muttered. He deployed his secondary weapon from his left gauntlet, an energon mace, a spiked ball of glowing purple energy on a spectral chain. He swung. The mace was aimed at All Might, who was mid-air. The hero twisted, using a Detroit smash against the air itself to alter his trajectory. The mace missed All Might by inches. It hit the bank building Optimus was driving on. The top 10 stories of the bank shattered. Concrete rained down. Optimus drove through the falling debris. He launched off the wall, transforming back into robot mode in midair. He was above Megatron now. "One shall fall!" Optimus roared. He brought the Energon axe down. Megatron blocked with his cannon arm. The collision of Energon axe and fusion cannon created a shockwave that flattened every car within a 2-block radius. The ground beneath Megatron cracked into a spiderweb of fissures. They locked weapons. The sparks from the grinding metal showered them like rain. "You are one-armed and weak, Prime," Megatron snarled, pushing back. His hydraulics were fresh. Optimus was leaking fluid from his cauterized shoulder. "I will crush your spark and mount it on my throne." "I am never alone," Optimus grunted, his servos straining. Whoosh! Green lightning flashed. Deku, moving at foe 100%, shot under Megatron's guard. He couldn't hurt Megatron with a punch. He knew that now, so he didn't aim for the armor. He aimed for the mechanism. Black Whip. Pinpoint. Focus. Midoriya fired a single condensed tendril of black energy. It shot directly into the knee joint of Megatron's right leg, the gap between the greaves and the thigh plating. Gear shift. Lock. Midoriya solidified the whip. It acted like a steel rod jammed into the gears of a machine. Megatron tried to step forward to crush Optimus. His knee servo jammed. The gears ground against the Black Whip construct. Crunch. The joint seized. Megatron stumbled. "Now, All Might!" Optimus yelled. All Might was already there. He had circled behind. He didn't punch. He grabbed Megatron's left arm, the one holding the mace, and braced his boots against the Decepticon's back. United States of Suplex. It was physics versus mechanics. All Might applied terajoules of force. Optimus shoved forward with the axe. Megatron was leveraged off his feet. The 40-ton warlord was slammed face first into the asphalt. Optimus didn't hesitate. He wasn't playing by cartoon rules. He stomped on Megatron's fusion cannon arm, pinning it to the ground. He raised his axe high, the blade burning orange hot. "Yield!" Optimus demanded. "Yield, or I sever the arm." Megatron looked up, his red optics flickering. He looked at the one-armed Prime. He looked at the human holding him down. "Yield?" Megatron hissed. "To insects?" His chest compartment opened. It wasn't a surrender. A blinding violet light built up in his chest cavity. A point-blank spark overload, an omnidirectional discharge. "Get back!" Optimus screamed, shoving All Might away. Boom! The explosion engulfed the intersection. Optimus was thrown backward, crashing through the lobby of an office building. All Might tumbled across the street, his suit shredded, skin burned by the radiation. Deku was blown out of the air, crashing hard into a parked van. Smoke rose from the crater. Megatron stood up. He was damaged. His chest plating was scorched. His knee was sparking where Deku had jammed it. But he was standing. He raised his fusion cannon. He aimed it at the hole in the building where Optimus lay buried. "A valiant effort," Megatron rasped, charging the weapon. "But the difference between us, Prime, is that I am willing to do anything to win." He prepared to fire the execution shot into the rubble. Suddenly, a red laser dot appeared on Megatron's forehead, then another on his chest, then a dozen. From the rooftops surrounding the plaza, a new group had arrived. Not the students, not the brawlers. The pro-heroes had reorganized. On the highest ledge, Shota Aizawa, Eraserhead, stood, his hair floating, his eyes burning red. He was staring directly at Megatron. Nothing happened. "Erasure," Aizawa muttered, blood dripping from his dry eyes. "It doesn't work. No quirk factor. It's purely technological." "Then we do it the old-fashioned way," a voice said beside him. Snipe leveled his modified high-caliber revolver. Ectoplasm generated 30 clones on the lower roofs. Cementos placed his hands on the concrete. "Fire!" A barrage of bullets, concrete spikes, and ectoplasm blasts rained down on Megatron. It was annoying. It was like rain on a tin roof, but it ruined his aim. The fusion blast went wide, slicing the top off the office building instead of incinerating Optimus. Megatron swatted a concrete pillar aside, looking up at the heroes with annoyance. "More pests," he growled. But from the rubble of the office lobby, a blue light began to glow. The debris shifted. Optimus Prime rose. He was missing a shoulder. His chest was blackened. His axe was flickering. But his eyes were burning with a terrifying resolve. He didn't speak. He just walked out of the dust. He reached behind his back and pulled something from his subspace storage. A handle. It extended. A double-barreled ion blaster, heavy and scarred from the Cybertronian wars. He racked the slide. CH chink. "Megatron," Optimus said, his voice dropping an octave, losing all warmth. "Class is dismissed." He opened fire. He didn't fire once. He walked forward, firing in a rhythmic, suppressing cadence. Thum, thum, thum. Each blast hit Megatron's shielding, forcing the Decepticon back step by step. Optimus was done protecting. He was hunting. The relentless cadence of the heavy ion blaster was the only sound in the world. Thum, thum, thum. Optimus Prime advanced. He did not run. He walked with the terrifying inevitability of a glacier. Each recoil of the massive weapon shuddered through his damaged chassis, vibrating the jagged, molten stump where his left arm used to be. Coolant leaked from his side, hissing as it hit the superheated pavement, but his aim did not waver. Megatron staggered back. His personal energy shielding flared violent violet with every impact, the geometric barrier fracturing under the barrage. "You persist," Megatron roared, bringing his fusion cannon up. "I endure," Optimus replied. He didn't wait for Megatron to fire. Optimus adjusted his aim by a millimeter. The next ion bolt didn't hit the shield. It hit the ground directly beneath Megatron's right foot. The asphalt vaporized. The Decepticon leader stumbled into the sudden crater, his aim thrown off. The antimatter blast from his cannon went wide, carving a trench through the cloud layer above the city. Optimus closed the distance. He racked the slide of the blaster again, CH click, and fired a spread shot. The glowing pellets acted like buckshot. They shredded the external sensors on Megatron's chest and blew the hydraulic cover off his knee, the same knee Deku had compromised. Megatron roared in frustration. The pro-heroes on the rooftops were a swarm of gnats, their bullets pinging off his helm, distracting his targeting computers, while the red and blue truck barreled toward him. "Enough!" Megatron abandoned the gunfight. He reached out with his free hand and grabbed a support pillar of the 40-story Mitsubishi Bank building next to him. With a groan of twisting steel, he ripped the pillar out. The building groaned. The structural integrity failed. Thousands of tons of glass, steel, and concrete began to cascade down directly onto Optimus Prime. "Prime, look out!" All Might screamed from the street, trying to force his injured body to move. Optimus didn't look up. He didn't dodge. He pointed the ion blaster straight up. Maximum charge. The barrel glowed white. He fired a continuous beam, a lance of pure particle energy. It didn't stop the building. It bored a hole through it. Optimus kept walking. The skyscraper collapsed around him, a waterfall of destruction. But through the center, in the tunnel vaporized by his blast, the Prime walked untouched. Debris bounced off his shoulder, dust coated his armor, but he emerged from the cloud of smoke like a mythological revenant. He was now 3 meters from Megatron. Megatron swung the fusion cannon like a club. Optimus ducked. The wind of the swing blew the dust off his optical sensors. He dropped his blaster. It was useless at this range, and uppercut Megatron with his remaining fist. Crunch! Megatron's head snapped back. Before he could recover, Optimus drove his shoulder, the melted, jagged spike of his left side, straight into Megatron's abdomen. The noise was sickening, metal shearing metal. The jagged remains of Optimus's axle housing punctured the weaker abdominal plating of the Decepticon. Megatron gasped, purple fluid coughing from his intake vents. He looked down at his brother. "You have become brutal, Prime." "I learned from the best," Optimus growled. He grabbed the barrel of Megatron's fusion cannon with his right hand. His grip crushed the focusing lens. "No!" Megatron panicked. He tried to fire. Optimus pulled. His hydraulics screamed. The servos in his back redlined. He wasn't just pulling the arm. He was ripping the weapon from the mounting. SCREEEE-SNAP. Sparks showered the plaza. Optimus tore the fusion cannon barrel clean off Megatron's arm. He spun and swung the massive weapon like a baseball bat, smashing it across Megatron's face. Megatron spun 360 degrees, crashing face first into the street. He lay there, his primary weapon gone, his armor breached, his optics flickering static. Optimus stood over him, chest heaving. He raised his foot to stomp the warlord's head. Suddenly, the sun was blocked out. A shadow fell over the Prime. A vacuum pressure tugged at his armor. Devastator had returned. The Combiner, missing a leg but propped up by a crutch made of 2 crushed buses and a bridge piling, loomed over the duel. His chest grinder was spinning. "Optimus Prime!" Devastator boomed. "Terminate!" The giant raised his remaining fist, the massive shovel hand. He didn't aim to punch. He aimed to flatten the entire intersection. Optimus looked up. He was too damaged to transform. He was too slow to run. "Smash!" The whisper came from the air. Green lightning arced past Optimus's ear. Izuku Midoriya, blood streaming from his nose, his right arm broken and hanging limp, was rocketing toward the descending fist. He was propelled by black whip cables attached to passing news helicopters. "I can't stop it." Deku gritted his teeth, tears of exertion streaming back into his hairline. "But I can redirect it." "Gear shift, low gear." He kicked the side of Devastator's descending wrist. He didn't try to stop the downward momentum. He tried to accelerate it sideways. The fist shifted 3 meters to the right. It missed Optimus. It slammed into the street beside him, the Shockwave launching the Autobot leader into the air. "All Might!" Deku screamed. From the dust, a golden blur appeared. All Might, utilizing the very last embers of his power, caught Optimus Prime in midair. It was a reversal of roles. The human caught the god. All Might landed on a rooftop, sliding back, his boots carving grooves in the gravel, holding the 10-ton robot. "I have you, old friend," All Might wheezed, blood coughing onto his chin. "We are not done." Optimus steadied himself on the roof, looking down at the street where Megatron was dragging himself out of the crater. Devastator was preparing for another strike. Midoriya purchased us 3 seconds, Optimus calculated. We need a weapon capable of piercing the Combiner's armor. I have no strength left for a smash like that, All Might admitted, his steam form flickering. Optimus looked at his severed arm. He looked at the heavy ion blaster lying in the street below. Then he looked at the massive energy signature radiating from the UA high barrier system in the distance. We do not need strength, Optimus said, his faceplate sliding shut. We need a conductor. He tapped his chest. All Might, my spark core produces localized plasma energy. If you can channel your bioelectric field, your one for all, into my intake vents. All Might's eyes widened. A fusion? A chaotic discharge, Optimus corrected. It will likely short-circuit my processor, but it will turn me into a living railgun. Below them, Devastator opened his mouth. The suction began again. Do it! Optimus commanded, bracing his legs. All Might placed both hands on Optimus's back. He summoned the ghosts. He summoned Nana. He summoned the bald man with the black whip. He summoned the 2 first users. One for all, full cowl, 100%, transfer. Golden lightning poured from the human into the machine. Optimus Prime's chassis arched. His blue paint began to glow white. His eyes turned from blue to a blinding, star-like gold. The matrix of leadership resonated with the Quirks singularity. Optimus extended his one good arm. He pointed his finger like a pistol at Devastator's chest. Metro, smash! A beam of blue and gold energy, a mix of Cybertronian soul and human will, erupted from his fingertip. It crossed the distance instantly. It hit Devastator in the chest grinder. There was no explosion. There was simply a hole. A perfect, clean hole, 10 meters wide, punched straight through the torso of the Combiner, exiting out the back and piercing the clouds. Devastator froze. The lights in his eyes went dark. The 6 Constructicons screamed in unison as their combined spark was severed. The giant swayed. Then, like a mountain giving up, he fell backward. Crash. The impact registered on seismographs in Tokyo. On the roof, Optimus Prime collapsed to his knees, smoke pouring from every joint. All Might fell beside him, reverted to his skeletal form, unconscious. Silence returned to the battlefield. But in the street below, Megatron was laughing. He stood up, holding his severed arm. He looked at the fallen giant. He looked at the exhausted heroes. Checkmate, Megatron whispered. He turned to the rift in the sky. Soundwave, he commanded, his voice reaching the backup server in orbit. Deploy Trypticon. The sky grew darker. Something much, much bigger was coming. The sky did not break this time. It simply ceased to function as a barrier. The object descending from orbit was not a meteor. It was a continent of steel. The heat shield alone was 5 miles wide, turning the atmosphere into a blinding sheet of white plasma. The sound of its re-entry was a continuous, bone-shaking roar that flattened forests and shattered eardrums 50 miles away. In the ruins of Musutafu, the combatants froze. Megatron, clutching the sparking stump of his arm, looked up. His expression was one of maniacal satisfaction. Rise, Megatron whispered to the apocalypse. Trypticon. The orbital Titan slammed into the bay of Musutafu. The impact vaporized the water instantly. A tsunami of steam and superheated mud rose 3,000 feet into the air, flooding the coastal districts. The seismic shockwave measured 9.5 on the Richter scale, snapping skyscrapers like dry twigs and rearranging the geography of the prefecture. From the boiling mist, the fortress rose. It shifted. Towers retracted, ramps folded. The city-sized construct stood up on 2 legs the size of mountains. A tail 3 miles long lashed out, leveling the industrial zone. A head shaped like a reptilian nightmare broke the cloud layer. Trypticon roared. It was a sound that made Devastator's voice sound like a whisper. It was a frequency that cracked the very tectonic plate beneath Japan. Destroy! Trypticon took a step. The vibration knocked the unconscious All Might in the offline Optimus Prime off the roof. They tumbled into the rubble below, saved only by a desperate catch from a barely conscious Izuku Midoriya using Black Whip. It's too big, Midoriya stammered, his eyes wide, pupils dilated to the point of breaking. We can't fight that. It's the size of a city. Megatron stood amidst the destruction, laughing. You see, insects? This is the true scale of the Decepticon Empire. Behind him, a jet engine whined. Starscream landed softly. He looked at the massive Trypticon destroying the horizon. Then he looked at Megatron. He saw the missing arm. He saw the cracked chest plating. He saw the leaking energon. Opportunity didn't knock, it screamed. Lord Megatron, Starscream said, his voice oily with false concern. You are critically damaged. Your judgment is compromised. Starscream raised his null ray. He aimed it directly at the back of Megatron's head. Perhaps, Starscream sneered, his finger tightening on the trigger, it is time for a new leader to direct the beast. Megatron didn't turn around. Starscream, I was wondering when you would find your spine. Before Starscream could fire, the ground exploded beneath them. But not from Trypticon. From the mountains to the west, a new tremor approached. It wasn't the slow, heavy stomp of a machine. It was a frantic, earth-shattering sprint. Trees flew into the air. Hills were plowed through. Tamura Shigaraki, sitting on the edge of a broken billboard, smiled. He held a small radio in his hand. Makia, Shigaraki whispered into the receiver. Master is in trouble. Come play. The mountain range split open. Gigantamakia arrived. The walking disaster. The Master's bodyguard. He was smaller than Trypticon, perhaps half the height, but he was moving with the momentum of a runaway freight train. His skin was stone. His muscles were braided cables of biological impossibility. Master! Gigantamakia screamed. The sound was not mechanical. It was the wail of a fanatical devotee. He didn't stop. He barreled straight into the city, ignoring the buildings, ignoring the heroes, ignoring the Autobots. He saw the biggest thing in the room. He saw Trypticon. Trypticon looked down at the biological gnat charging him. Vermin! Trypticon opened his mouth. A plasma cannon the size of a tunnel charged purple energy. Gigantamakia didn't dodge. He leaped. The sheer leg strength required to launch a creature of that mass shattered the bedrock for a mile. Gigantamakia soared through the air, closing the distance before Trypticon could fire. For the Master! Gigantamakia lowered his shoulder and slammed into Trypticon's chest. The impact was heard in Korea. Trypticon, the city former, the orbital fortress, stumbled. The biological battering ram had hit him with enough kinetic force to rock his gyroscope. The plasma shot went wide, carving a line of destruction through the stratosphere. Gigantamakia latched onto Trypticon's metallic hide. His massive fingers dug into the plating, ripping out chunks of steel. He began to climb the robot kaiju, clawing his way toward the throat. Trypticon roared in outrage. He swiped at his chest with claws that could gut battleships. S-C-R-E-E-E-E-E-E. Trypticon's claws raked across Gigantamakia's back. The hero killer rock skin sparked, chipped, and bled magma-like blood. But Gigantamakia didn't let go. Pain is service, Gigantamakia howled. He reached Trypticon's neck. He bit down. Biological teeth met Cybertronian throat cables. In the street below, Starscream lowered his weapon, his mouth plate hanging open. By the Allspark, Megatron chuckled. It was a dark, wet sound. Finally, a challenge. All for One floated down to land beside Shigaraki. He watched his pet monster wrestling the alien fortress. "The metal men are sturdy," All for One noted, adjusting his cuffs. "But biology adapts. Biology evolves. Metal only rusts." He looked at Megatron. "Shall we call a truce, alien?" All for One projected his voice. "My monster kills yours, and while they are busy, I kill you." Megatron turned, his red optic burning. He deployed an energy blade from his remaining wrist. "I have one arm, human," Megatron growled. "That is still one more than I need to end you." The war for Musutafu had transcended heroes and villains. It was now a battle of titans in the sky and warlords in the street. And in the rubble, a small blue drone hovered over the unconscious body of Optimus Prime. Scanning. Scanning! Wheeljack's voice crackled over the drone's speaker. "Hang on, Prime. I've got a crazy idea, but I'm gonna need the kid with the engines in his legs to pull it off. Can you run, kid?" The question came from the Lancia Stratus drifting around a corner on two wheels, tires screaming against the ruined pavement. Wheeljack transformed mid-drift, his mechanical feet sparking as they hit the asphalt. He held a device in his hands, a cylinder pulsating with volatile, unrefined blue energy. It looked less like a battery and more like a bomb. Tenya Ida adjusted his glasses. His armor was dented, his exhaust pipes clogged with dust, and his left calf engine was sputtering, but his posture remained rigid. "I am the class representative of Class 1A, Ida stated, revving his engines to a high-pitched whine. "And I am the successor to Ingenium. I can run." "Good," Wheeljack said, shoving the cylinder into Ida's chest. "This is a raw energon capacitor. It's unstable. If you shake it too hard, it blows. If you stop moving, it overheats and blows. You need to jam this directly into Prime's intake vent before his spark fades completely." "Where is he?" Ida asked, feeling the terrifying heat of the device against his ribs. Wheeljack pointed. 3 miles away, directly beneath the wrestling match between Trypticon and Gigantomachia, lay the fallen Autobot leader. "Go!" Wheeljack shouted, deploying his shoulder cannon to blast a falling piece of debris. "I'll clear the path." Ida didn't hesitate. "Recipro Turbo." He vanished, the Warlord's circle. 2 blocks west, the duel for dominance was tearing the district apart. All for One hovered in the air, a picture of effortless arrogance, though his suit was singed. He extended a finger. "Air cannon plus spring-like limbs plus kinetic booster ×4. The invisible Shockwave hammered Megatron. The Decepticon skidded backward, his heel claws carving deep trenches in the road. His armor, already compromised by Optimus, groaned under the pressure. "You are heavy," All for One mused, floating closer. "But every machine has a breaking point." Megatron stood his ground. He was missing an arm. His systems were failing, but his rage was infinite. "You rely on borrowed power," Megatron growled. He lunged, swinging his energon mace with his remaining hand. All for One didn't dodge. He caught the spiked energy ball with his bare hand. Impact recoil. The kinetic energy of the swing was instantly reversed. The mace flew back, smashing into Megatron's own faceplate. Metal sheared. Megatron staggered, his vision flickering. All for One descended, his hand glowing with red and black sparks. "I will take your body," the villain whispered, reaching for Megatron's exposed chest circuitry. "And I will make you kneel." Megatron's red optic narrowed. He didn't pull away. He leaned into the touch. "You think..." Megatron snarled, his voice a grinding tectonic plate. "You are the first to try and control me?" Megatron's chest compartment snapped open. Not to fire a blast, but to expose the dark energon flowing through his veins. All for One's hand touched the purple substance. Immediately, the villain recoiled, screaming. The dark energon didn't just burn, it corrupted. It lashed out like a sentient virus, infecting the Quirks All for One tried to use. "What is this?" All for One gasped, clutching his blackened, smoking hand. It bites back." "It is the blood of Unicron." Megatron laughed, kicking All for One in the chest, sending the symbol of evil crashing through a bus stop. "And it does not serve you." The sprint. Tenya Ida was running inside a nightmare. Above him, Gigantomachia ripped a dorsal plate off Trypticon. The massive slab of metal, the size of a football field, fell toward the street. Ida didn't look up. He watched the shadows. The shadow grew larger. Torque overdrive. He pushed his engines past the red line. His mufflers turned blue. He shot forward, outrunning the shadow just as the metal slab crushed the city block behind him. The shockwave lifted him off his feet, but he kept his legs spinning, landing in a sprint without losing momentum. He saw Optimus Prime. The Autobot was buried to his waist in rubble. His color was graying. The light in his chest was a faint, dying flicker. "Prime!" Ida screamed. He leaped over the body of a crushed drone. He slid under a fallen beam. He reached the massive chest of the robot. The heat from the energon capacitor in his arms was unbearable. It was burning through his chest plate. "Ingenium guides me." Ida jumped. He slammed the cylinder into the open vent on Optimus's chest. Clang. For a second, nothing happened. Then the capacitor discharged. It wasn't a spark. It was a defibrillator shock meant for a planet. Blue electricity arced from Optimus's chest, grounding out into the rubble. The surge was so powerful it blew Ida backward, tumbling him end over end into a pile of sand. Optimus Prime's body convulsed. The gray armor flushed with sudden, vibrant color. The red became crimson. The blue became royal. The optics didn't flicker on. They slammed on. Beams of twin blue light pierced the dust cloud. Optimus sat up. The rubble covering his legs was thrown aside like confetti. He didn't say a word. He looked at his missing arm. He looked at the chaos above. The kaiju, the warlords, the dying city. He stood up. He reached down and picked up the severed limb of a fallen Decepticon drone. He ripped the drone's blaster off the arm and magnetically clamped it to his own stump. It was a crude, ugly fix, a pirate's hook made of a gun. He turned to Ida, who was lying in the dust, gasping for air. "Thank you, Tenya Ida," Optimus rumbled. His voice was deeper now, resonant with the energy of the capacitor. "Rest now. I have the con." Optimus Prime turned toward the skyline. He saw Trypticon. He activated his comms, not to the Autobots, to the orbital relay. "Metroplex," Optimus broadcasted. "Heed the call of the last Prime." Nothing happened. Optimus waited. Then the ground shook. Not from Trypticon, not from Gigantomachia. The ground shook because the city itself was answering. Beneath UA High, beneath the foundations of the school, something ancient woke up. The security barrier wasn't just a wall, it was a dormant titan. The ground around the school split open. UA High didn't collapse, it rose. The massive H-shaped buildings shifted. Towers became shoulders. Runways became legs. Metroplex heeds the call. The Autobot City former stood up. He was white and red, towering even over Trypticon. He was the answer to the Decepticon apocalypse. Optimus Prime watched his reinforcements rise. "Autobots!" Optimus roared, charging back into the fray with his scavenged gun arm. "Transform and rise up." The scale of the war had just shifted again. The data feed in Starscream's processor screamed a singular binary truth: defeat. He hovered at an altitude of 2,000 feet, his optical sensors locked on the horizon. The sight defied logic. The school, the H-shaped human construct, had unfolded. It was not a building, it was a Titan. Metroplex stood taller than the mountains, his white armor gleaming through the smoke, his shoulder cannons tracking Trypticon with the cold precision of a planetary defense system. Starscream looked down at the street. Megatron was maimed, fighting a losing war against a Quirk-stealing demon. The Constructicons were scrap. Trypticon was wrestling a rock monster. Loyalty was a variable Starscream had deleted from his programming cycles ago. "I-dots," Starscream hissed, the turbines in his chest spinning up to a high-pitched whine. "They will die for a dirt ball. I will rule from the stars." He didn't announce his departure. He simply engaged his transformation cog. Ch-ch-rur-kunk. In a fraction of a second, the robot vanished, replaced by the sleek, predatory geometry of an F-15 Eagle, modified with Cybertronian thrusters. The afterburners ignited, painting the gray sky with streaks of violet fire. He went vertical. 0 to Mach 2 in 3 seconds. The sonic boom shattered the remaining glass in the downtown district. Starscream tore through the cloud layer, aiming for the vacuum of space, for the Nemesis ship orbiting silently above. He was the fastest thing in the sky, or so he calculated. "Going somewhere, big guy?" The voice didn't come from the radio. It came from the air pressure wave riding his left wing. Starscream's rear sensors flared. A red blur was drafting in his slipstream. Keigo Takami, Hawks, was pushing his body beyond the red line. His visor was cracked, his jacket shredded from the earlier shock waves, and he had lost 40% of his feathers. But the wind was his domain. He wasn't flying on power. He was flying on instinct, reading the microcurrents of Starscream's own wake to surf the sonic cone. "Persistent vermin!" Starscream screeched over the external speakers. He rolled the jet, pulling 9 Gs, and deployed his air brakes to force an overshoot. It was a maneuver that would have crushed a human pilot. Hawks didn't overshoot. He detached 10 feathers. Feather blade, Gatling. The feathers didn't aim for the armored fuselage. Hawks knew that was useless. He aimed for the seams, the ailerons, the intake vents. The feathers struck the hydraulic actuators of Starscream's left wing flap. They didn't pierce the metal. They jammed the mechanism. Starscream shrieked as his roll destabilized. The jet lurched violently to the left. The aerodynamics compromised. "You ruined my paint job! I ruined your flight plan!" Hawks yelled, fighting the G-force trying to liquefy his organs. He banked hard, diving beneath the spiraling jet. "Now, Tsukuyomi!" Clinging to Hawk's back, wrapped in a cloak of pure darkness, was Fumikage Tokoyami. The environment was perfect. The sky was choked with soot. Trypticon's arrival had blocked the sun. Metroplex's shadow cast the world in twilight. For Dark Shadow, this wasn't a battlefield. It was a buffet. "The abyss," Tokoyami whispered, his eyes glowing red, his beak grinding in concentration, "is bottomless." The shadow entity erupted from Tokoyami's chest. It wasn't the small, bird-like familiar the class knew. It was a leviathan of condensed darkness, swollen on the misery and gloom of the war zone. Its claws were the size of cars. Its roar was a psychic shriek. "Dark Shadow! Ragnarok!" Hawks released his grip. Tokoyami was launched upward, propelled by the recoil of the shadow's expansion. Starscream, struggling to regain altitude, transformed back into robot mode in midair to clear the jam in his wing. "Get off me!" Starscream roared, firing his null rays blindly. The pink beams burned holes in the clouds, but they couldn't hit the shadow. Tokoyami hovered above the Decepticon, a speck of black against the gray. But the shadow attached to him was a Titan, abyssal black body, Baldur's Breaker. Dark shadow ravaged downward. It didn't punch, it crushed. Two massive claws of solid darkness clasped their hands together into a sledgehammer. Starscream looked up. His optics widened. No! The impact was thunderous. Dark shadow slammed onto Starscream's head and shoulders with the weight of a collapsing building. Cybertronian alloy met semi-solid darkness. The force was enough to shatter the sound barrier a second time. Starscream's thrusters sputtered and died. The Seeker was spiked out of the sky like a volleyball. He fell. He plummeted 20,000 feet, a streak of silver and smoke. Crash. Starscream hit the roof of the Musutafu Convention Center. He punched through the roof, through 4 floors of concrete, and embedded himself in the basement parking garage. Debris rained down after him. Hawks caught Tokoyami in midair, his wings barely functioning, gliding down to a nearby perch. "Nice hit, kid," Hawks panted, wiping blood from his nose. "I think you grounded him." Tokoyami crossed his arms, though his hands were trembling uncontrollably from the exertion. Dark Shadow shrank back to normal size, whimpering and exhausted. "Gravity," Tokoyami muttered, trying to maintain his composure, "is a harsh mistress." Down in the crater of the convention center, Starscream groaned. Sparks showered from his broken nose cone. He tried to stand, but his servos whined in protest. A steel girder was impaled through his left turbine. "I hate..." Starscream coughed, leaking blue fluid. "This planet." He looked up through the hole in the ceiling. He saw the birds circling, and then he felt the vibration. Step, step, step. The footsteps weren't Hawks. They were heavy, metallic. Starscream froze. Out of the shadows of the basement garage, a figure emerged. It was not a hero. It was not a villain. It was a white car with red and green stripes, transforming into a robot with a glowing faceplate and a shoulder cannon. Wheeljack held a massive wrench in one hand and a freshly recalibrated stun grenade in the other. "Well, well," Wheeljack drawled, tapping the wrench against his palm. "Look what the cat dragged in. Or should I say, the bird." Starscream scrambled backward, his back hitting the concrete wall. "Wheeljack, wait, we can negotiate. I have intel. I have codes." Wheeljack primed the grenade. "Sorry, Screamer," the inventor said, his ears flashing blue. "I'm not in the trading mood. My friend Optimus took a heavy hit today. I'm feeling a little explosive." Starscream raised his hands. "No, wait, Wheeljack tossed the grenade. Flash bang out. The basement exploded in a brilliant flash of blinding light and EMP discharge. The tectonic plates beneath Musutafu groaned in protest. This was no longer a battle. It was a planetary reconfiguration event. Trypticon, the Decepticon Godzilla, lashed his tail, a 3-mile whip of jagged armor. The strike demolished the coastline industrial zone, sending oil refineries tumbling into the boiling sea. He roared, a sound wave that shattered windows in Tokyo, and lunged for the throat of the white and red Titan standing before him. "Metroplex, die!" Metroplex did not roar. He did not posture. He moved with the terrifying, silent discipline of a fortress that had learned to walk. The Autobot city stepped forward, the impact registering as a localized earthquake. He caught Trypticon's jaws with 2 hands the size of aircraft carriers. "You a barrier system, offensive mode." Metroplex's shoulders, which were literally the high-rise dormitories of the school, opened. The blast shields usually meant to keep reporters out now inverted their polarity. A wall of shimmering, solid light energy erupted from Metroplex's chest. It wasn't a shield. It was a battering ram, He slammed his chest into Trypticon, driving the Decepticon kaiju backward. Trypticon stumbled, crushing the highway overpass beneath his heels. Gigantomachia, still clinging to Trypticon's back like a flea on a wolf, howled as the impact shook him loose. The walking disaster fell 2,000 feet, crashing into a stadium, leaving a crater where the baseball diamond used to be. The assembly line of hope, 3 miles away on the roof of a parking garage that had miraculously survived the tremors, a desperate industrial revolution was taking place. "More lipids!" Momo Yaoyorozu screamed, her skin pale, her body trembling from caloric exhaustion. "I need more mass!" She wasn't creating a shield. She wasn't creating a cannon. She was creating a nightmare of engineering. Surrounding her were the support course students, led by Mei Hatsume in Power Loader. Cementos was bracing the roof. Lunch Rush was force-feeding Yaoyorozu high-calorie bars. "We have the schematics," Hatsume yelled, her goggles zooming in on the holographic blueprint projected by Wheeljack. "It's a Cybertronian photon buster, but adapted for human biology. It's crazy. It's dangerous. I love it." "Build it!" Optimus Prime's voice boomed from the street below. He was firing his scavenger gun with his one good hand, keeping a swarm of Decepticon drones at bay. "Trypticon's armor is regenerating. We need a weapon capable of piercing the planet's crust." Yaoyorozu closed her eyes. She visualized the molecular structure of tungsten, titanium, and depleted uranium. She visualized the complex circuitry of an alien railgun. She screamed. From her back, a massive barrel began to emerge. It was heavy, gray, and ugly. It slammed onto the concrete roof, cracking it. "Creation! Titan-Slayer Railgun!" It wasn't finished. It needed power. "Charge it!" Denki Kaminari yelled, grabbing the rear conduction port. "Everyone, zap me!" Kaminari acted as the lightning rod. Behind him, huge portable batteries brought by the support course were hooked up. Every electric-type hero in the vicinity grabbed a cable. The railgun began to hum, a high-pitched whine that rose above the sound of the kaiju battle. The king and the demon. While the titans wrestled and the students built, the leaders fought in the dirt. Megatron was a ruin. His fusion cannon was gone. His left arm was a sparking stump. His chest was open, bleeding. Dark Energon, All for One, was not much better. His suit was shredded, and his right hand, the one that had touched the Dark Energon, was a blackened, useless claw, the necrosis spreading up his forearm. "Why?" All for One wheezed, floating just out of reach. "Why do you not break? I have broken the spirit of the greatest men. I have stolen their power. You are just a machine." "That," Megatron spat, dragging his damaged leg forward, "is your error." Megatron dropped his energy mace. He didn't need it. "You steal power, human. You hoard quirks like trinkets. You think power is something you possess." Megatron lunged. It wasn't fast. It was heavy. It was inevitable. All for One unleashed a blast of air pressure. "Air cannon, max output." Megatron walked through it. His armor peeled away. His internal skeleton was exposed. But he didn't stop. He reached out with his one remaining hand and grabbed All for One by the throat. The Demon King's eyes widened. He tried to activate a warping quirk. It failed. The interference from the Cybertronian grip was jamming his neural pathways. "Power," Megatron whispered, lifting the villain off the ground, "is not what you have. It is what you are." Megatron squeezed. "And I am Megatron." He slammed All for One into the pavement. Crack. It wasn't the pavement that cracked. It was the helmet. It was the skull. Megatron didn't stop. He punched the villain. Again and again. Just raw, mechanical violence. No beams. No tricks, just a warlord beating a usurper into the earth. All for One's consciousness began to fade. For the first time in a century, the symbol of evil felt the cold, encroaching embrace of actual death. Master! Gigantomachia, pulling himself out of the stadium ruins, saw his leader being pulverized. The beast screamed, ignoring the battle with Metroplex, and charged toward Megatron. Go! Megatron growled, looking at the approaching monster. He tossed the broken body of All for One toward the beast. Take your trash and leave my planet. Gigantomachia caught All for One in a massive hand, cradling the villain like a doll. The beast looked at Megatron, then at the sky where Trypticon was recovering, then at the army of heroes. For the first time, the monster knew fear. Gigantomachia turned and ran, retreating into the mountains, carrying his broken master. Megatron stood alone in the street. He swayed. His systems were at 4%. Cowards, he muttered. The final alignment. Target locked, Hatsumi screamed. On the roof, the Titan-Slayer Railgun was glowing white-hot. The air around it was distorting from the heat. Optimus Prime saw the signal. Metroplex! Optimus commanded. Restrain him! The Autobot city responded. Metroplex lunged forward, ignoring Trypticon's plasma breath burning his armor. He grabbed Trypticon's massive tail and heaved. Trypticon was spun around. Metroplex wrapped his arms around the Decepticon kaiju in a full Nelson hold, pinning the beast's arms to its sides. Trypticon roared, thrashing, exposing his glowing purple chest core. Now, Optimus, Metroplex boomed. Take the shot. Optimus Prime looked up at the roof. He saw Momo. He saw Kaminari frying his brain to keep the charge. He saw Deku, Bakugo, and Todoroki standing guard. Optimus transformed his arm, the one with the scavenger gun, and ripped it off. He didn't need the junk anymore. He leaped. He landed on the roof next to the students. He grabbed the handle of the massive student-built railgun. It was sized perfectly for him. This, Optimus said, the vents on his faceplate hissing, is the alliance of Earth and Cybertron. He shouldered the weapon. The weight of it settled on him. The energy signature was chaotic, a mix of electricity, creation lipids, and sheer desperation. He aimed at the exposed chest of Trypticon. Midoriya, Optimus said, not looking back. If I miss, you must run. You won't miss, Deku said, his voice firm. He stepped up, placing his hand on Optimus's leg. Green lightning flickered. One for all, 20%, stabilization support. Deku braced the Prime's leg against the recoil. Optimus's optics flared to maximum brightness. Matrix, system, open! He didn't just fire a shell. He opened the matrix of leadership within his chest, channeling the holy light of Primus into the chamber of the human weapon. The barrel turned gold. Light our darkness! He pulled the trigger. The trigger broke. Not because of a mechanical failure, but because the force applied by Optimus Prime's finger exceeded the tensile strength of the hardened steel. It didn't matter. The connection had been made. The sound that followed was not a bang. It was the tearing of the atmospheric envelope. The hyper-density tungsten slug, suspended in a magnetic field charged by the matrix of leadership, accelerated from 0 to Mach 70 in a space of 12 meters. The recoil was an event of geological significance. The roof of the parking garage disintegrated. The concrete turned into powder instantly. Izuku Midoriya, bracing Optimus's leg, felt the bones in his forearm fracture from the sheer compressive force. But he did not let go. Optimus Prime was driven backward, his feet carving deep furrows through the reinforced steel beams of the structure. The projectile crossed the 3-mile gap in 0.0004 seconds. It struck Trypticon directly in the glowing purple singularity of his chest core. There was no resistance. The slug, moving with the kinetic energy of a meteor, did not push the Titan. It erased the matter in its path. It punched through the energon shielding, through the meters of Cybertronian armor, through the reactor heart, and exited out the spine. The beam of golden light continued, piercing the storm clouds and vanishing into the upper atmosphere, leaving a tunnel of vacuum in its wake. Trypticon went rigid. The purple light in his eyes turned white. Then it went black. Metroplex, holding the beast, felt the life leave the frame. The massive city former released his grip and took a heavy step back. Threat neutralized. Trypticon fell. The impact of the dead city former hitting the bay created a second tsunami, but Metroplex deployed his blast shields, protecting the coastline from the wave. The water boiled around the corpse of the invader. Silence returned to Musutafu. It was a heavy, ringing silence, broken only by the distant wail of sirens and the crackle of cooling metal. On the ruined roof, Optimus Prime dropped the melted remains of the railgun. He sank to one knee, his systems critically overheated, steam pouring from his vents in a thick white fog. Optimus vented, his voice ragged. We are functional. Deku collapsed next to him, clutching his broken arm, looking out at the smoke clearing over the bay. We won. The aftermath, Sector 4. In the streets below, the dust began to settle. Megatron stood alone. He was a ruin of a warlord. His fusion cannon was gone. His armor was stripped. He was leaking vital fluids onto the asphalt. He looked at the dead Trypticon. He looked at the standing Metroplex. He looked at the humans, the ants who had built a weapon to kill a god. A warp gate flickered open behind him. Soundwave, limping and supporting a critically damaged Starscream, emerged from the shadows. The Decepticon flagship, the Nemesis, had descended to a low orbit, casting a long shadow over the ruins. Lord Megatron, Soundwave synthesized, his voice full of static. Retreat. Logical. Megatron didn't move for a long moment. He stared up at the roof where Optimus knelt. The two brothers locked optics across the battlefield. This planet, Megatron growled, spitting out a glob of energon. It is poisoned with hope. I leave it to you, Prime. Let it rust you from the inside. Megatron turned. He dragged his broken leg through the portal. Soundwave followed, dragging Starscream. The portal closed. The Decepticon signal vanished from the planet. The farewell, 2 hours later. The sun was breaking through the smoke, casting long golden rays over the devastated city. The survivors were emerging from the shelters. The pro-heroes were beginning the grim task of search and rescue. In the plaza, the Autobots had gathered. They were battered, scarred, and leaking, but they stood tall. Grimlock stood apart from the group. He was staring at a small, cratered area of the street. Katsuki Bakugo sat there staring at the ground. He hadn't moved. The rage was gone, replaced by a hollow numbness. Grimlock knelt. The massive T-Rex lowered his head until his snout was inches from the boy. Little Bomber, Grimlock rumbled softly. Bakugo didn't look up. They're gone, Grimlock. I couldn't save them. Grimlock snorted, a puff of steam ruffling Bakugo's ash-stained hair. The Dinobot opened his mouth. He didn't breathe fire. He regurgitated a small glowing shard of metal. It was a fragment of Cybertronian ore, dense, heavy, and warm. He nudged it toward Bakugo. Pack, never gone, Grimlock said. Carry them, in spark. Bakugo looked at the shard. He picked it up. It was heavy. It felt permanent. He gripped it until his knuckles turned white. Yeah, Bakugo whispered, wiping his eyes with a dirty forearm. In the spark. The departure. Optimus Prime stood before UA High. His arm was still missing, his chest scorched, but his presence was undiminished. All Might, bandaged and skeletal, stood beside Izuku Midoriya and the remaining students of Class 1A. "You must go?" Midoriya asked, his voice trembling. "The war has followed us here," Optimus replied, looking up at the sky. "If we stay, Megatron will return. He will bring armies. We cannot make your world our battlefield." "You saved us," All Might said, bowing deeply. "You fought for people who were not your own. That is the definition of a hero." Optimus knelt. He extended his one hand, one massive metal finger. Midoriya reached out. He placed his small, scarred hand against the tip of the Prime's finger. The connection hummed again. The vestiges within One for All whispered a farewell to the Primes within the Matrix. "In any universe," Optimus said, his blue optics shining with warmth, "freedom is the right of all sentient beings. You have that fire within you, Izuku Midoriya. Do not let it go out." "I won't," Deku promised. "I'll keep running toward it." Behind them, Metroplex began to shift. The city Titan was transforming, not back into a school, but into a launch platform. An ancient Cybertronian shuttle, the Ark, descended from the clouds to retrieve the Autobots. "Autobots," Optimus commanded, standing tall. "Roll out." They transformed. Bumblebee beeped a sad farewell to Eri. Ironhide nodded respectfully to Endeavor. Wheeljack gave a thumbs up to Hatsumi. Grimlock roared one last time for Bakugo. They drove up the ramp of the Ark. The engines ignited, a pillar of blue fire that pushed the gravity of Earth away. The ship ascended, piercing the sky, shrinking until it was just a star among stars. Midoriya stood there long after they were gone, watching the empty sky. The city was broken, friends were lost. The world was changed forever. But as he looked at the horizon, he didn't feel fear. He felt the weight of the legacy. "We are here," Midoriya whispered to the wind. And in the silence of the aftermath, the wind seemed to whisper back, "Till all are one." The narrative thread has reached its terminus. The current timeline stabilizes, and the audio transmission ends here. But the portal never truly closes. It only waits for the next divergence. To ensure you are present when reality fractures again, you must align with the signal. Subscribe to What If Portal Comics. It is the only way to guarantee your passage into the next chapter. The archives are vast, and another world is already waiting for your observation on the screen. The next jump is yours to make. For now, let the static fade. Enjoy the music in this moment of stillness while you decide your next destination. See you in the next reality.